Director Dernberger. Figured you were putting your coalition together.
Putting a coalition together, yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to reconvene the meeting at 1:40 on January 9th. And we will go to item number 6 on our agenda, Racing Division Director Jennifer Dernberger.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
All right, brief administrative, wow, that's loud. Brief administrative update for you all. Racing season will be upon us before we know it. So I just wanted
hard
to
to believe.
update you that we are going to be starting the hiring process. Positions, the higher level racing official positions that the commission employs are going to be posted either Friday or Monday at the latest. There'll be a second round for some of the other seasonal employees coming up in February, but we are getting started on that. The backstretch area of Suffolk Downs usually opens early to mid-April depending on the weather, and Plain Ridge Race Course would begin qualifying races probably around late March in anticipation of an April 14th start date, so that's going to be here before we know it, just a couple months away. We have, let's see here, we have an amendment to Chapter 128C. Chapter 167 of the Acts of 2013 amended Section 2 of Chapter 128C. It increased the number of running horse signals that the Greyhound licensee in Bristol County can import. This was signed on November 26th, and with the 90-day effective date, it looks like that would take effect on February 25th of this year.
So what was that? The Plain Ridge?
Raynham, the Raynham facility.
Got additional rights for importing
To
signals.
import 2 additional signals. So you'll recall that when we sent a report to the legislature earlier of this year, when we looked at harmonizing and modernizing the existing statutes, one of the recommendations we made was to look at having unlimited simulcasting for our licensees. The way the statute's currently written has very specific things. You can take 2 of these signals, you can take 4 of those signals. And so this was an amendment to one of those pieces there. So it increased the number of running horse signals before 4 p.m. that licensee could import from 4 to 6.
Is there a public policy interest that you can articulate in why the state should regulate how many signals you import?
I don't want to mischaracterize it, but it's a bit of a relic to a time when the business model was very different, which was one of the reasons that we made the recommendation.
Right. Right.
So we can have that conversation.
Yeah. But if we're up to us, there wouldn't be that.
That was the recommendation that we've
Right,
made, yes. Yeah. Okay. What else do we have going on? We have some legislative things. I can move to item 6B. An interim legislation proposal. Bridging the gap, I think, was a term I heard used earlier in a different context by the chairman, so we'll call this the Bridging the Gap discussion. Commissioners, as you know, sections 39, 41, and 112 of the Expanded Gaming Act will act in concert to repeal the existing parimutuel and simulcast statutes on July 31st of this year. And in the absence of any legislative action, these scheduled repeals would necessitate the cessation of all racing and wagering activities in the Commonwealth. This is objectionable to us on a number of levels, but what would that look like? My understanding is that there have been shutdowns in the past when the simulcast statutes and the parimutuel statutes have sunsetted. They were temporary shutdowns, as evidenced by the fact that we have an industry to regulate today, but these are different circumstances, and so I would just like to give you a snapshot of what that would mean if this business were to cease. The horse racing industry, as it exists in Massachusetts, last year, this commission issued 3,118 occupational licenses in horse racing. Approximately 1,500 individuals received W-2s or 1099s from employment at our 3 licensee facilities. That's over 4,500 individuals who derive income directly from horse racing at the Commonwealth's 2 racetracks and 1 simulcast facility. And it doesn't begin to touch the thousands more that are employed at the breeding, layup, training, and aftercare facilities in the Commonwealth. The combined membership of the Harness Horsemen's Association of New England, which is the professional association of the standardbred occupational licensees, the standardbred owners of Massachusetts, which represents the breeders, the New England Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association, which is the thoroughbred occupational licensees, and the Massachusetts Thoroughbred Breeders Association, is nearly 1,500, the majority of whom qualify as small business owners. They create jobs at the rate of 0.8 full-time equivalents per horse. This is a labor-intensive industry. Our racetrack licensees, the three of them collectively pay over $4 million a year to state and local governments in the form of local aid payments, real estate payroll, and sales and use taxes. And I'd like to point out something that I think we've never brought before the commission before, and therefore not before the public, but all of this economic activity takes place at no regulatory cost to the Commonwealth. My operating budget for the racing division is borne entirely by revenue derived from a percentage of handle, monies that are wagered on horse racing, and all of that is just what's on track, right? So then we have all of the agribusiness extensions, because what we see at the racetrack begins on the farm. Racing has significant and complex linkages to the agricultural manufacturing sector, the agricultural services sector, and the rural economy in general. I was poking around and I found the UMass Amherst Center for Agriculture website. Fascinating fact of the day for you all, which is that the top two types of farming in Massachusetts are hay farming and equine production. Hay farming, I'll have you know, is not only the most common type of farming, but also holds the greatest amount of farmland in the Commonwealth at 142,000 acres. That's 27% of the Commonwealth's farmland. Equine production constitutes another 28,000 acres, or a little over 5%. So when you put those two together, the equine industry in Massachusetts is responsible for fully 1/3 of all the farmland acres in the Commonwealth. And while not all of this acreage is attributable to racehorses, when we look at economic impact studies in other jurisdictions, the majority of all equine production is either directly or indirectly related to the racing industry because of the dollars involved. It's an economy of scale. So the tractor dealer, the feed store, the veterinarian that service a recreational horse farm, they set up shop where they do because that farm is usually located in proximity to the farms that are breeding the racehorses. So I just wanted to put that on the record. I think it's something that we haven't really talked about in that kind of summary form before. But this is why we think that we need to do something in terms of the sunsetting of the statutes. So it is the Expanded Gaming Act that has set these chapters for repeal this time around. And we note that in the finding and declaration section of that act, there is a mandate to preserve jobs in existing industries. And I hope that you find, as we do, that this industry is very much worth preserving. I can think of no greater harm, no greater negative or unintended consequence of the expanding gaming legislation than if we lost the pari-mutuel industry and all of its attendant jobs, livelihoods, green space, and family farms. So to keep it going, we need some enabling legislation. And to that end, you'll recall that this commission was charged at the outset with reviewing the existing chapters for efficacy and need to replace, right? And we completed that review last spring. We sent a report to the legislature. We looked for ways to modernize the statutes to conform to the changed business practices and the technological advances of the industry as we find it today. We also attempted to harmonize the law to comport with the new regulatory framework provided by Chapter 23K. But we have a little bit of a timing issue, and so that's why I come to you today. That report rested on an important assumption, and I'm going to refresh your memory about that. In order for breeding and racing to continue, the industry requires a sustainable purse structure. The purse structure is what the prize money that the owners of the horses get to run for. And as we've said here before, the purse structure in Massachusetts is simply non-competitive, due in large part to neighboring jurisdictions that have expanded gaming. As you know, a percentage of monies from gaming go toward purse supplements. Many Mid-Atlantic and East Coast racetracks benefit from these supplements at the expense of jurisdictions like Massachusetts. And the legislature recognized this when it established the Racehorse Development Fund. It's a similar fund here, and that's in the Gaming Act. But when we look ahead, and we have the experience of the last year gone by, and we have a little bit more clarity as to the timeline of the awarding of the licenses, we made the assumption in that report that the purse structure would be supplemented by money from the Racehorse Development Fund. But due to the current timing of the award of the licenses, it looks to us now that won't be fully funded, and the anticipated levels won't be reached until at least 2016. And if you look at our statutes sunsetting here in 2014, a 2-year extension would put us right about that time when all of the anticipated monies would be coming into the Racehorse Development Fund. So we think that the prudent course at this point would be to seek a 2-year extension of chapters 128A and C with some minor modifications that we think are necessary in the short term to help stabilize the industry and survive until such time as that Racehorse Development Fund is fully funded in its anticipated levels, and then follow that with the replacement legislation. We recognize that the legislature may be looking to this commission to introduce reform, and we would provide assurances that that reform is coming. But again, as I said to you in October, we just want to make sure that we're fully informed by the landscape in which that law would operate. Ultimately, our ultimate goal here would be to create a stable investment climate for all of our stakeholders. Our horsemen work on a 5-year business cycle when they make their plans. Because of the infrastructure involved, our operators are necessarily long-term looking as well. So if we could create that stable investment climate, that's our ultimate goal here. The racing division is actively working on a strategic vision, which I'm going to come to you later in the spring. We're going to include some benchmarks to create accountability for the industry, compel it to improve the quality of its product, and we're going to propose some reforms in the business model outside of the statute that would be designed to grow the wager and create self-sufficiency in the industry. And we think that dovetails and comports very nicely with the vision in the Racehorse Development Fund and the purse supplements. So we look forward to beginning that, but in the meantime, I think a 2-year extension of the existing legislation with some minor changes is the way to go. I will pause there before I go into any further detail.
Just a quick question,
Yep.
Director. Thank you. Your summary was excellent of where we were, where we thought we would be, and where we are in reality. The 2-year proposed extension, I know that you've discussed it with the stakeholders. Could you give us a summary of their reaction?
I can. So I think that all are in agreement that something needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And that something would be either an extension or a replacement legislation. We've identified 5 or 6 points of discussion where we think the existing law might benefit from modification in an extension. Excuse me, in an extension. And I'll be happy to go through those with you. So we've had preliminary conversations with all of the stakeholder groups. I divide them into 8 different groups: the Commonwealth, the 3 operators, the standardbred occupational licensees, standardbred breeders, thoroughbred occupational licensees, and thoroughbred breeders. So we've had preliminary conversations with leadership. They knew what we were going to talk about today. And my goal here, bringing this to you, is to get authorization from you all to put recommendations in writing, go back to the stakeholder groups, and then they would have something they can put before their boards and vote on. And our hope would be that they would sign letters of support, and then we would come back to you with the proposed language as well as the stakeholder letters.
Thank you.
Coordinating somewhere in there with communications with the legislature about what we're planning on.
Absolutely.
I think it's a sound plan. I've been talking to Director Durenberger about it, and it makes sense for me that the landscape is not settled, and the monies will not be available as timely as we thought they would be, and that this would be an appropriate way to move forward.
Well, you haven't laid out the particulars of the plan yet, right?
Correct.
To us.
I was pausing because I
Yeah.
saw a lot of note-taking,
Right.
and I didn't want to get ahead of you all
Right.
before I dove into section 2. So,
Go ahead.
okay. So there's 5, possibly 6 points now of discussion, and they are as follows. The first one's very easy, which is general cleanup. The statute still has, the existing statutes still have references to live greyhound racing, so we would do some general cleanup. I would be remiss as the director of an administrative agency to not look at some revenue builders. The operating budget, as I mentioned, is derived entirely from percentage of handle as well as daily license fees and assessments on our operators. And so we would just need to take the opportunity, if we're going to open it up, to look at the appropriateness of those current levels of assessments. I recognize that the operators are not going to be seeing increased revenue during this period of this extension, but I still think we do need to look at it.
You still think what?
I still think we do need to look at it.
With an
Whether the
effort
current-
to see whether it's too high, too low, or
My-
too low?
Too low. Yeah, too low. They've not, I'm
Adjusted.
anticipating it's been a while since they've been adjusted. We've significantly increased the level of regulatory oversight, and that comes at a cost. And that operational oversight, that increased regulatory scrutiny is designed overall to add value to their product, because we're supposed to be increasing the confidence of both participants and the pari-mutuel customers. So we do think it's fair to look at increasing that. Tax reform. We've discussed the negative effects of the new state tax reporting and withholding thresholds on the pari-mutuel industry. They don't appear in these chapters, so I'm not sure how I would envision addending that to these statutes, or whether that's going to move forward through the gaming side on its own. But I do want to keep that issue out there, that its effects on the pari-mutuel industry are negative. We had difficulty quantifying the effects, but we do know that all of our stakeholders receive funding as a percentage of handle. So as handle declines, so the industry declines.
The $600 doesn't appear in 128A or C, is that
It
what
does
you're saying?
not, no.
Okay, but didn't 128A and C get amended in some way by a
We
provision?
did not. Chapter 62, or was it 62B did, it was in the tax statute where the change appeared. So the Expanded Gaming Act, there was an outside section that amended that, either 62 or 62B. I apologize for not having it right in my head.
That's all right.
So it did not, there was nothing in 128A or C that was affected by that.
Yeah, but that's a part of this package, and it's, I don't know where I ultimately come out on that, but the fact that it isn't in 128A or C doesn't seem to me to be an impediment to
You know what I think?
discussing.
I think the impediment, it's not an impediment, I just think that it is, as Director Dernberger said, it will be, the withholding issue is going to be addressed for gaming across Massachusetts. And it doesn't need, the time sensitivity of the extension of 128 and whatever it is, 9, A and C, yeah, is immediate, and there's no reason to link those two.
I see.
The withholding
I see.
is going to
I
be a
see.
more
I see.
complicated question.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
we'll
Gotcha.
absolutely get to the withholding on behalf of pari-mutuel and
Right.
gaming.
Okay, got
But
it,
it'll be in its own context.
got it, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, that's 3. Raynham and Wonderland, simulcasting. Section 92 of Chapter 194 of the Acts of 2011 permits the former Greyhound licensees in Bristol and Suffolk counties to continue to simulcast in the absence of live racing through July 31st, the same time that 128A and C are repealed. These licensees together contribute 37% of our operating budget. Raynham Park alone contributes almost 28% of our operating budget. About $500,000 a year to thoroughbred purse money, about $100,000 to the standard breds. They pay state and local aid and taxes, and they employ about 150 people year-round. So again, it's not a 128A or C issue. This Section 92 of Chapter 194 of the Acts of 2011 essentially created a statutory simulcast license, but I think it's certainly worth looking at whether that could be extended. We do note that there's another option available to these entities. As previously licensed pursuant to Chapters 128A or C, Chapter 23K, Section 7B does allow them to apply to the Commission for a simulcast license. There are some issues there. The first iteration of Section 7B tied the takeout and the monies that went to all the stakeholders to Chapter 128C. So in other words, whether you placed the wager in that facility or whether you placed it somewhere else on a racetrack licensee, what happened to the money that the state withholds was going to be identical. There was an outside section in the Acts of 2011 in Chapter 194 that actually changed the language that was in there, added the previously licensed entity as a 128A or 128C entity, so it increased the group of people that could potentially apply for that license, but then it took away that tie to 128C and left in its place a single requirement, which is 10% going to the Racehorse Development Fund, which is great, except that there isn't any other take out there for the Commonwealth, for example, or any of the other stakeholder groups. So we would have to, and I see Commissioner McHugh's wheels are turning, we would have to think
His
about
wheels of
what that would look
comprehension
like.
are turning,
Or incomprehension.
incomprehension.
So we'd have to look at what that looks like. Is that something that we can address through regulation or not? I don't know. But it's certainly something that we need to look at and consider, because there will also be, I would think, a Region A licensee that may look to have a race book as well.
Would it be more, in trying to simplify, knowing we're just going with a 2-year plan, would it make more sense to just request that be continued as well, as opposed to starting a new process through?
On its
The
face, I
new
think that,
law?
yeah, on its face, I think that makes more sense.
Okay.
Item 5, minimum number of race days. As we've noted at many past meetings, there's 2 primary reasons why the industry has had to seek legislative relief in each of the last 3 years from the minimum number of race days requirement. And when we say minimum number of race days requirement, again, just to bring everybody to the same place, there appears in this existing statute a requirement that an operator give 100 days of live racing and 900 races in order to be able to simulcast. So again, it's not you must run 100 days. You can run any number of days you want. But as we know, over 90% of the money's from simulcasting. So that is what that requirement reads. The last 3 years, the industry's gone to the legislature requesting relief in the form of an 80-day and 720 race requirement. The 2 reasons for this, as we've talked about, are the shortage of available horses and a non-competitive purse structure. The 2 problems are not mutually exclusive by any means, but the circumstances which have effectuated that need for relief are going to be unchanged, entirely unchanged in the short term. If anything, we have some additional handicapping factors that may increase the shortage of horses. And so we have a couple of things. If we're going to do this extension and we're going to look at legislation that's affecting the meet in 2014 and 2015, I can tell you today that the 100-day, 900 race requirement is unsustainable, and I think that my stakeholders would be mostly in agreement with that. One alternative would be to put the 80-day, 720 races requirement in the suggested, in the proposed extension. I've looked at this back to front, up and down. I've looked at it from all levels, and I have to tell you that I think committing the industry to a firm number for these next 2 years, given all of the attendant unknowns that surround both industries, I think that could put us in a corner. I would really hate to be in a position where we make a recommendation, say 8720, and then it comes into effect on August 1st, and then all of a sudden we have to go back to the legislature, maybe in September, because some unanticipated circumstance occurred. There's been a lot of unanticipated circumstances that have occurred along the way here, and I think that would really deal us a blow to our credibility. If we recommended a firm number, and then there were some unique circumstances that developed, to have to go back and seek legislative relief on that in short order, I'm concerned about that. So
What would that be?
could be any number of things. The award of the Category 2 license is going to be right before that particular licensee proposed to schedule its live racing meet. As we know, that live racing meet is conditioned upon the award of a gaming license. And so at that point, if there is no racing at Plain Ridge Park, we still have to have a different applicant perhaps come back to us with an amended application. That would be the Brockton Racing Group, and we don't know what that application necessarily looks like at this point. They were awarded a license for 1 day, and then encouraged to make use of the provision that enables them to come back with a supplemental application if the conditions on which their application was premised come to fruition. But perhaps those conditions won't come to fruition, so we don't know if there would be another plan out there or not. Let's say that both of our existing 128A licensees got gaming licenses. There's going to be construction scenarios, and those construction scenarios are going to look very, very different between the two tracks. The facilities, the proximity to the racetrack itself, the size, the scope, the timeline, very, very unique between the two. So there's so many unknowns right now that if we suggest a firm number, it takes effect, and then suddenly that number doesn't make sense for the industry. I hate to have to go back and beg for relief on that.
So what are you suggesting? I think I missed that recommendation.
Yeah, so it would not be unprecedented to not have a minimum number of race days requirement in the statute. It wouldn't be unprecedented at all. We would put the onus on the industry, on the operator, and on the horsemen, once their particular situation has been figured out, to come back to us with the business case that makes the most sense. We see in other jurisdictions that some states don't have any minimum statutory requirement. It's interesting, the language in Maine, for example, one of the things that the commission has to consider when thinking about the number of race dates, the language in the statute is that the commission shall consider the number of race-worthy horses available, which I think is fascinating language. New Jersey has a mandate for the commission to consider the available purse level divided by the number of race days, and where that puts that purse structure in terms of a competitive situation with its neighboring jurisdictions. We see other states that don't have minimum requirements, they have maximum requirements. The commission can award up to X number of days. And so I don't think that this is, I recognize for our breeders that it takes away the safety net and the opportunities to race, and we can have that discussion going forward. I think we'll have it privately before we have it publicly, but I think there's an excellent business case to be made for our recommendation. So.
Just for the record, I mean, I like that a lot. I mean, I know it's an imperfect analogy, but we don't legislate 162 baseball games a year. You know, I mean, to leave it up to the industry makes who better to make the decision than a negotiation among the parties, you know. And what I realize that there are interest groups that feel that they're not as strong as other parties. I realize all that, but it does seem to me like a really ideal solution. Let the industry work it out themselves. So what seems to work for the most party to the best possible extent.
And we recognize that the Expanded Gaming Act, for example, has an increasing number of live days requirement, and this no days suggestion would affect the meets in 2014 and 15 because of the time that this would take effect this summer.
Right.
It's a really short-term issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference. If the Commonwealth, in effect, is contributing a lot of money towards a racehorse development fund, that at least, you know, arguably gives the Commonwealth sort of a skin in the game in terms of the negotiations. But prior to that happening, particularly during this incredibly vulnerable period of when nobody knows for sure what's going to be happening, on the face of it, it certainly makes sense to me. But I realize there's lots of people in the room who know a lot more about this than I do, but conceptually it makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, and with all the construction that's going on and all, I mean, there's a gazillion, well, maybe not that many, but a lot of variables.
Might be a gazillion.
Right?
Half a gazillion, anyways.
But when we think about the different, and again, this is just acting as if, but when you think about the difference in what construction scenarios would look like at the two tracks in terms of timeline and size, and scope of the project, they're so unique. I mean, what makes sense for one is going to look totally different than what makes sense for another. And we hear stories about, and I'm not picking on anyone in the room, but we hear stories about when the parking garage was under construction at Plain Ridge. And during training hours, there would be announcements made that, we're going to start blasting in 10 minutes, so everybody back to the barn. And that worked, and that was okay. But that's not okay with me as a regulator, that training's going on out there, and you're bringing in steel, and you're blasting things, and I have concerns about that coming up, so.
So you're essentially recommending that we seek this extension for 2 years of 128A and C, and the 5 points of discussion being that we attempt to address all those 5 points in some form or fashion, even for the extension.
Absolutely, these are specifically
Specific
designed, yes, for the
things,
extension.
yeah.
So these are the preliminary conversations we've had with the stakeholders, and as I said, I look to you today to vote to authorize me to put them in writing and get them to the stakeholders so they can put them before their board for consideration. Because there'll need to be some discussion, obviously, at that level.
Right.
On some of these issues more than others. And I do,
Yeah.
if there's, I had one more thought,
Yeah,
one
please.
more point. I know I had said 5. There is a 6th that I've started considering this week. I'm not quite sure how to address it, but one of the recommendations that we made in the report we sent to the legislature in April had to do with the prohibition, the existing prohibition on rebating and wagering on credit. And of course, those prohibitions do not exist in Chapter 23K. And so in an attempt to harmonize, one of the recommendations we made was to remove that prohibition. And it occurs to me that that may make sense actually to remove that prohibition as part of this extension, only because you may have facilities that are operating, gaming and racing at the same time, that may be open and operating, in 2015, for example, when this extension is still in place. And it doesn't seem logical, as we pointed out in the report, to be able to, in one side of the house, if you will, offer rebating type programs or wagering on credit, but if you cross the line and go on the other side of the carpet, then that prohibition is in effect. So I don't quite know how to address that, but I wanted to throw that out there as something I've been thinking about this week. It was a recommendation we made ultimately for the replacement legislation.
Well, I think we're clearly, we have to do something, there's no question about that. So we're clearly, I think, in favor of you making some recommendation. And, you've done a tremendous job in immersing yourself in the particulars here and in getting to know the perspectives of all the constituent groups. And I know you're talking to them constantly on this. I would say, yes, please do go forward. Please do formalize this strategically. And again, there are people in the room who know a lot more about this than I, but strategically, less is more clearly. There's a relationship between the likelihood of success in the legislature with the degree of unanimity on the proposal. And the degree of unanimity on the proposal is probably enhanced by less too. So
Well said.
on 2 scores, less is more.
Well said.
But you'll figure that out. And it may be best to leave battles for the future where you can in order to get us through this 2-year complicated window. And try to get maximum support for the 2-year window with whatever you think the minimum critical variables are, and leave the rest of it till the time when everything shakes out and we know what the lay of the land is and know who's got licenses and who doesn't, and can really go for the macro long-term solution. I know you know all that, but
it's duly noted.
Well, I agree with that. I just don't understand the dimensions of the 6th point, I guess. And I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about that before authorizing it to, there's nothing wrong with negotiating it or talking about it with the stakeholders, but I don't understand it at the moment and would like to before signing off on it. So, whenever the appropriate time is.
You tell me, is the appropriate time to continue that discussion now, or to, again, because this was preliminary, I didn't really bring any talking points in terms of what it means from
Right.
dollars and cents wise, other than it's industry standard to permit both practices in racing. In the Gaming Act, both practices are permitted. And so in our original replacement legislation, we made the recommendation to remove the prohibition from the racing statutes so that racing and gaming played by the same rules on these 2 issues.
is anybody opposed to that?
The horsemen have concerns, for example, with rebating about whether that money, that rebate that's returned. So rebating is the practice of returning money to customers based on a percentage of handle. So if you bet $1,000, you get a dollar back, or however it works. The horsemen want to just make sure that their interests are protected and that money's coming out of the racetrack operator's margin and not out of any money that would be earned for purses, for example. And there's very easy ways to do that in regulations. We see that in
Does
other
the operator have
jurisdictions.
the same view?
I've actually not talked to this, other than when we made the original recommendation, the operators had submitted letters in support of removing that prohibition.
And having it come out of their share?
That issue was never addressed.
Okay, right.
So that would be a discussion to have going forward.
Right. I mean, to me, the idea of rationalizing it between the two
No, I think
types of
that's-
gambling makes perfectly good sense. Whether Jennifer can orchestrate a consensus on this right now is,
No, I agree that they ought to,
yeah.
that they ought to be the same in both places. But but we need, but you'd need to have regulations that, or statutory language that indicated that how it was going to work, right?
Absolutely.
So this would be this would be sort of, and what might work for racing, would it necessarily work for the gaming side?
I don't know the structure of those programs.
Yeah. Well, there's no harm in dealing with it in principle, I suppose, for the racing side temporarily. What do we do if we on the gaming side, because we're going to be dealing with the slots parlors here soon, had a slightly different take from the way it was working on the racing side? Suppose that'd be okay too.
Well, I think the idea to just put something in draft and then take it to the stakeholders will probably answer those questions for us, because they'll come back if they have an issue with the draft language and make another suggestion. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I'm being inarticulate, but that's not unique. I guess what I'm trying to raise the question of, we get something that's acceptable to the horsemen in terms of rebating and credit, but it works on the racing side, but it's not going to work. The same plan is not going to work on the gaming side. What do we do then?
No, but
Do we have? Is it okay if we have a slightly different or a significantly different way that it works on both sides? Suppose that would be all right?
well, there's already a rebating on the gaming side in the gaming statute.
Yes, it permits it, but it doesn't, you
It's
don't
not
have
fleshed out, if you will.
It's not fleshed out.
but I don't know that they're exactly the same in all of the,
Right.
so
That's
would
his
it
point.
make a difference if it was
Right.
the same?
Right,
The gaming people aren't going to care whether it comes out of the breeders or not.
right, right. But the percentages might be different. You can rebate up to X is acceptable on the racing side. Rebate up to X isn't going to work on the gaming side. It's not enough, say. I don't know.
I suspect they'll tell us when this draft goes out, there'll be time for input.
Well,
From the
there's
racing side, no question.
the report. How long ago were we looking at this? The report that we submitted included a lot of discussion on this
It
and
did.
a few other topics.
Yeah, it did.
So perhaps, I for one would like to go revisit them and understand that a little bit better, but to Commissioner Cavern's point, perhaps what we need to is have, a draft before us soon on all these 6 topics and come back to it.
Well, you're going to skip the withholding, but, so it's 5, I think, right? But, yeah, all you're looking for is the support in putting together a proposal to take to your constituents.
Right.
And you might also float it by the legislature as however that timing works out. And then it will come back to us at some point with feedback from the constituents and possibly the legislature, and we'll deal with it at that point. And the regulations of how we implement rebate programs, for example, is a whole other matter. We'll get to that on both industries in due time.
Why are we skipping the withholding?
Just because we're going to get to the withholding whenever we get to it, once we're all teed up for everything, not just the pari-mutuel side, but the gaming side. So there's no need to try to get a withholding adjustment in this legislation. It'll be done whenever we get around to getting to the legislature to address the withholding issue. It's just they're on a separate tracks. They might happen to get together, but at the moment they're on separate tracks.
Well, and argue.
Excuse me, go ahead.
I don't know that they need to, is my point. They need to be on separate tracks, but
I would like to go, I think we're better off going to the legislature after we've gotten all the stakeholders to sign off, and we agreed too, aren't we? Yeah. So if we put something together and we talk about it with the stakeholders, then it comes back to us, we approve it. Maybe that's the best way to go, and let the gaming side worry about the gaming side when we get there. I guess that's the only thing we can do. I'd hate to be in a position where we took something up to the legislature and then reviewed it.
Well, the only thing we might do with the legislature or some of the legislators is say, here's what we're thinking about. What's your advice? What's your appetite?
Sort of an informal.
Yeah, we wouldn't go with a firm proposal that we might then not support. But if we get to the legislature before we've got this buttoned up, then it would be advisory.
Right. Legislators.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so do you need a vote, or do you need just a sense of?
I think Director Day and I talked about this, and I think we would feel more comfortable with a vote authorizing me to put something in writing to bring to the stakeholders. Obviously, I would show it to you first before we sent it out, but to have the authority to do that. I didn't want to put the cart ahead of the horse. You know, we've been having the preliminary discussions. These are the topics. This is probably the way I'm going to make a recommendation, but I haven't yet, produced any written product for them to bring to their stakeholders. These have just been conversations with leadership. So I think having the authority of the commission behind that, voting the racing division, authorizing that kind of more detailed discussion would be beneficial.
Okay. Well, and it is important, and a vote of the commission will help. It is important for your constituents to know that we feel very strongly about the need to get a 2-year extension in place. We're flexible on what all is in that extension, and that will depend as much on your constituents, our constituents, as anything else. But we're very much supportive on getting some proposal together that everybody's behind and moving it as fast as we can. Okay, Commissioner Cameron, do you want to?
Mr. Chair, I move that we authorize Director Durenberger to prepare a document for review by all the stakeholders to include a 2-year extension and the 5 issues that we talked about here today, and just to exclude the tax deduction issue that will be handled globally.
Second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
well,
Well, are we, go ahead.
I was in favor of that motion with the exception of the exception, or the exception of the exclusion. But, I think in principle, giving you a direction, I'm okay with that. And to put something before us.
There's nothing wrong with talking, with having the six, I mean, if they want to talk about the withholding, they can, but the withholding issue is a serious issue in terms of the gaming revenues,
Well-
the industry, the $85 million deposits, et cetera. So it's going to get addressed, and whether it's addressed at this moment in time or not on behalf of the pari-mutuel industry, it's going to get addressed. So that was my only point, that we needn't hook it up to the 2-year extension. But it doesn't have to be kept out. I don't care if it's in or out, but no need to have it get in the way of the 2-year extension.
That's fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a slightly different point. The motion is fine so long as it's clear that we're not authorizing Director Durenberger to go negotiate a deal that then is binding on us. In other words, the product of these negotiations probably will be fully acceptable. I have great confidence in Director Durenberger and everything she's done. But I'm not prepared to say, go negotiate something, and whatever you negotiate, I'm prepared to sign off on and send up to the legislature. So with that understanding, I'm prepared to vote in favor of this motion. But if others are not, think we're giving Director Durenberger more authority than that, we ought to get that squared away now.
No,
So the stakeholders understand.
yeah, I did not mean the motion to include authorization for a final, this would be a draft document for review and consultation with stakeholders, so that we would have the benefit of that information before we move forward to authorize the document.
With that clarification, then I support what has been proposed. I think it makes good sense.
Any other discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
Item C, transition update. Mr. Beckerly. Commissioners, as you know, on January 1 of this year, Springfield Gaming and Redevelopment assumed the operation of Plain Ridge Racecourse. They are our newest Chapter 128A and C licensee. So on behalf of this licensee, Mr. Chris Mackerlane is here today. He's been in his current position as Vice President of Racing for Penn National since 2007. Having worked his way up in the industry through a number of positions, as we all have over the years, both harness and thoroughbred racing, most notably a 14-year tenure with the New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority. And in his current position, he oversees the racing operations at all of the Penn National tracks, which includes now Plain Ridge Racecourse. So he's here just to give us an update on how the transition on 12/31 went, and also to introduce him to you all as our newest licensee.
And who's the guy you brought in with him?
For those who don't know, on my right is Mr. Steve O'Toole. Thank you, Director Durenberger, and thank you, Chairman and members of the Commission. I will make a very brief report on the transition at Plain Ridge Racecourse. It was when we were awarded our license in early December, we went right to work. In terms of the transition, this was somewhat unique. It wasn't a purchase, as you know. Basically, with our way leaving the scene, all contracts, permits, everything had to be redone from the ground up. We spent a lot of time getting all those in place. We had several meetings with employees during the month. We had resources from our accounting, human resources, simulcasting, working with Steve and his team to get things in place for the 1/1 changeover. I'm pleased to report that we did rehire all the employees at Plain Ridge Racecourse. Approximately right now, there's about 60 employees right now for the simulcast only operation. All employees were brought back at the same rate of pay, same job titles, same benefits for those who were receiving it. So everybody was kept whole in terms of the transition from that standpoint. I'm also pleased to report that Mr. O'Toole is our general manager and has full authority at the property for decision-making capabilities on our behalf. On the January 1st, and actually on December 31st, we did our money room changeover with Our Way. Basically the countdown of everything in the money room. Everything went well. All the balances were brought over, including the win line balance for the account wagering, as well as accounting for the outs for the state that expired on December 31st, as well as the current ones that are in effect for the current year that don't expire until December 31st of this year. The only issue on the first, minor hiccup, very minor, but we'll just bring it out. There was one simulcast signal that was scheduled that we were not able to take because of contractual issue on that track side. It was a dog signal. Not even sure which one it was, St. John's Greyhound in Florida. So other than that signal not being able to be offered for our customers, everything else was seamless in terms of the front-facing operation, no problems. And since then, there's been no issues whatsoever. Going forward, we just want to let the Commission know we are hitting the ground running. We do want to make sure that the operation runs smoothly, both from a customer point of view, from an employee point of view, and from a business point of view. To that end, You'll probably start hearing some advertising for Plainridge Racecourse, probably the first time in many years. I'll be starting next week on two of the biggest sports radio stations in the Boston Providence market. So that will be out there starting next week, probably running for about 4 or 5 weeks. We've ordered some new uniforms for employees, trying to do some sprucing up around the facility. We are also evaluating our staffing levels and taking a look from the business point of view and our internal controls. We're also putting some of our purchasing contracts in effect that we have corporate-wise for the benefit of Plainridge. We're also scheduling compliance training this month. Title 26, the reportable transactions, those Title 31 is the gaming side, Title 26 is on the pari-mutuel side. Responsible gaming training for all employees will be put in place this month. We're going to be having OSHA training, and our internal audit team will be up before the end of this month to review the first few weeks of operation and make sure that everything is conforming to our internal control procedures. So just want to let you know that we're taking this extremely seriously as we do all our operations, and we're implementing the type of controls and policies and procedures that we have at our other facilities around the country. We're happy to answer any questions that the commissioners or chairman may have.
Anybody? Commissioner?
No, I was going to ask a question about what the uniforms look like, but
We'll save you one if you
I'll
want.
save it.
Right. He's got a
I'll
thing. You can send him one and do yourself some benefit. You probably, I think, answered this sort of, but in the fact that you promoted Mr. O'Toole's implies the answer to this, but did you find either operational issues, internal control issues that were problematic, or were there significant operational differences between your way of doing business and the existing way of doing businesses?
Well, I guess the answer is in general no. Obviously, we had a good chance to look at the operations. I will give our way credit in 2 ways. One, their cooperation during this transition was very professional, and we appreciate all their help. When the situation happened this summer at Plainridge, I think the new management, or the new upper management for our way that was brought in to institute some new standards and controls, they did a good job getting that ball rolling. I think we saw some ways that we can tweak some things, but in general, we didn't find any huge lapses or huge large concerns. But there's certainly, we think we can bring some additional standards and some additional training that maybe wasn't done before. For example, the Title 26 training, to my knowledge, was never done at Plainridge. So we think that's important, and that's a compliance issue for all our properties, especially being a publicly traded company as well.
When is the responsible gaming training?
It should be occurring this month. We don't have a specific date set, but it will be probably by the 3rd week of this month.
Okay, because that might be something Mark would be interested in
And he's, attending, okay, because I know
Yeah.
I've forwarded the, from their other properties, their plan,
Yeah.
their responsible
It might be
gaming plan.
interesting
and
to
so-
him to, yeah. So
Sure.
let
That-
him
that
know
would be
when
no
it's coming
problem.
up. Yeah, good. Anybody else?
No, this really sounds, on a serious note, this really sounds very positive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very seamless transition. Sounds great.
I appreciate your coming in. Great, thank you.
If I
I
could,
think we have another thing on the
Oh, all right.
We do.
Yes,
Need to
you
stay
do.
up for that.
we do, yeah, why
Okay.
don't you stay for that? Item D, proposed player rewards program. So there was, Plainridge Racecourse did offer a player points program prior to January 1. As the new group came in, they looked at it and have come to the commission with some requests for clarification as to what's appropriate. They don't want to flirt with that rebating prohibition that we had just spoken about in some detail. So in your packet is a memo dated January 2nd, which outlines their vision for that program. And we just wanted to put it in front of you. Legal has also been looking at this, and so I will defer to them if you have any specific questions. So questions about the program, I guess we would address to Mr. McElwain. Questions about the propriety of the program, I guess we would direct to General Counsel.
I understand this better. Go ahead, yeah.
No, I was just going to ask
Yeah.
if council had a chance to look at this and review it, and found it to be in order.
Get the mic, Catherine.
We looked generally at the statute itself and are comfortable that the statute talks about money rebating, so a point kind of system to be used for other things we think is appropriate. We do acknowledge, though, that we do need regulations around this under 128, and so that's now on our list of things to do for regulations. But we think something going forward along these lines would work until we get better regulations in place.
Does this rebate program raise the out of whose pocket does it come issue that you raised before?
No, so rebate's a defined term in our statute, and it's money returned based on percentage wagered. This is not money returned, so there are some merchandise items, racing programs, handicapping materials,
no.
gift shop, food, beverage. So my understanding is that it wouldn't be rebating. The rebating that would be of concern to the horsemen has to do with, they have profit-sharing agreements, contractual profit-sharing agreements with the operator. And as part of the money that's earned for purses, there are very specific things, monies earned, that go into that purse account. And so the horsemen with rebating are concerned as to whether or not the rebate comes out of the money that's supposed to go, that they're splitting, that they're doing the profit sharing, or if it's coming out of what goes to the operator as a result of the profit sharing.
Yeah, I guess more precisely, there's a cost associated with these things, and the question is, out of whose pocket does the cost come, if it comes
Sure.
out of anybody's?
Well, there is a cost. Obviously, there's a retail cost and an actual cost for things like a racing program,
Right.
or the daily racing form,
Right,
or
right.
a hot dog.
Right.
So that cost is borne 100% by the operator, and that's going to be factored into any, however the program is structured. The earning of these points to redeem for these items, it will be based on the value that they're getting back from that standpoint. And again, this falls in the line of trying to do, from a customer-facing program, this is not going to change the world, so to speak, but we think from a customer loyalty point of view, customer appreciation point of view, is something that we can come back to them and say, we're trying, and it's a small reward type situation. So in the past, it's been a popular program. We're comfortable with controls that we're going to put in to make sure it's run the right way, and we would ask for your approval to move forward from that standpoint.
Quick question, do you have similar programs on the other properties in which you own and manage?
We do, and it depends on the size of the property, depends on sometimes on regulations. I can say in some properties we are allowed to do cash vouchers for wagering, but we offer other amenities. Some of the points are used to have access for special amenities, special clubs or dining room reservations or things like that. So the answer is yes, we do have it at other racing facilities.
What does this sentence mean? Based on our review, it appears some aspects of the original intent of the program were not followed and possibly circumvented existing regs.
Our understanding, talking with Plainridge, that there were certain incentives or items offered that may, in some eyes, may have been seen as a way of, may have been a rebate, gift cards, things like that, which we're not planning on offering from this program standpoint. So that's things that we had heard in the past, had not been in effect with after the circumstances in August, that had been totally stopped, to my understanding.
Okay. Anybody else? Anything else?
Seems like a sound program.
Yep.
Within regulatory guidelines.
And an appropriate
Right.
cleanup, yeah.
Right.
You don't need an action from us.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, just for perspective, is it the description that's provided by Chris here in paragraph 5, the first sentence, and the first, except for the last sentence, I guess, is that what we're talking about for the program?
Those would be the items that would be included.
Right.
Yes.
And then with the additional of the qualification, the cost is borne by the operator?
That is correct.
Right. Do we need a motion for that, or?
Do you need, yeah,
I think so.
doesn't look like it.
I think we were just looking
Yeah.
that we were
Right.
on sound footing from that standpoint.
Right, great.
Looks good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Finished?
That concludes the racing division update.
All right.
Great, thank you
Thank you,
very much.
Director.
We will
Thank you
take
for
a-
your time.
Take a quick break, try to be back in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
We're waiting on Commissioner McHugh, but he's on his way.
Always just a step behind.
But he got more steps than
Got
you
his,
did.
got his constitutional.
You got my constitution.
All right, we are reconvening at 2:47, and the first item on the agenda is item 7, administration. Mr. Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. and
Good
Commissioner,
afternoon.
Good afternoon. And just as well, make sure I wish a Happy New Year as we start off on
Thank you.
on a new year.
Happy New Year.
I'd like to just make a little, couple notes as we move forward, and one of them is that as I happen to look at this, that in spite of the weather, illness, and holidays, in December, the Commission continued to implement the provisions of the Gaming Act, including the completion and suitability determinations for category regions A, B, and I think also the host community hearings, and I think lots of times that sounds simple, but of course those were streamed, implemented the specifics of the statute, and were really significant accomplishments. The commissioners now are continued with the evaluation process for the slots license, and if my rudimentary calculations are correct, you're probably about 90 days through the process. And of course, you're targeting your also on the progress for the surrounding communities, and the goal is to eventually refer for an award decision in March or excuse me, February or March. Also provides me an opportunity to make sure I can talk correctly as I'm moving forward.
Gives you some practice.
So we know why I don't do anything on the news channel. But besides and the items listed on the agenda, I also wanted to mention a few more tasks that we've been able to move forward with. One of those, of course, has been noted in the media that we've received 3 Category 1 applications, and are now, our licensing division is moving forward with administrative complete process to examine and make sure that all the material that the Commission has requested is there out of the 32,000 pages.
32,000 pages.
Yes. Nice. I find that number quite substantial, and I wish Mr. Acosta and his crew the best as they move forward with that process. And then, of course, I have to also move that process on, and the ultimate goal is to...
Sorry, Kevin, yours was only 100 pages, but the other ones were 31,000. I mean, you guys dropped them. Oh. We think it's higher. Oh, all right. I saw you shaking your head there.
Well, I might one-up Kevin a little bit, but we are aware there is a second section of response due to end on the 21st, so I'm sure those totals will increase. But the ultimate goal, of course, is to move that information forward to the Commission afterward they're ensured that they're administrative complete. They'll be made available to the Commissioners responsible for each category and their related independent and professional evaluators to begin the evaluation process and ultimately the award of the license for Category 1. In the meantime, our licensing and technical staff are also working closely with our contractors to develop our licensing and document management systems, and we anticipate being able to provide the Commissioners with a report hopefully by the end of the month on our progress. We've developed position descriptions and open recruitment for the Investigation and Enforcement Division's Assistant Directors, responsible for financial investigations, and Gaming Unit agent supervision. At this point, we're in the process of screening about 83 applications, We have screened and also in the process of interviewing applicants for our accounts payable fiscal position. You also, of course, heard from our horse racing director that we're beginning recruiting for those horse racing official positions this Friday, as a matter of fact. We've also posted a RFR and formed a procurement team to identify and ultimately select the resources we need for monitoring the licensing projects as they move forward, and we hope to be able to complete that in early March. With that, that's just a few of the administrative items that we're moving forward with. I'd like to go ahead and touch on the proposed organizational chart, if I might. First thing is our human resources manager, Trupti Banda, is ill, and so Derek and I are going to do our best here as answer any questions you might have and also talk about the organizational chart. It's in your packet under item 7B. And at this point, part of the reason we're coming forward is, of course, we've completed our director level hiring, and so we thought it was we were at a good point to ask the commission to approve our organizational structure at the divisional level. So that's why it's a pretty condensed organizational chart, but it's intended to describe that division and office level as we move forward. One of the foundations of the proposed structure has, in fact, been the effort of the commission to place an emphasis on key areas of the statute like research and problem gambling, workforce diversity, communication, community outreach. So that's why we have directors in each of those areas as well. As we continue to develop the organization, the roles may change, and of course we may need to reconsider how the various elements of the agency continue to develop. I might note you in the structure you have seen. I'm just going to real quickly go across it. Licensing Division, Racing Division, Investigations and Enforcement Bureau, which of course is statutory, Office of Workforce Supplier and Diversity Development, Office of Research and Problem Gambling, Ombudsman, Information Technology, Finance Division, Legal Division, Office of Communications. One of the reasons why we wanted to bring this chart forward is we are making a decision, and hope you will also concur, that our Human Resources Office will be part of our Finance Division under the leadership of our CFAO. The other...
And this is tiny, but it's Finance and Administration Division, which makes Human Resources sound reasonable. It's kind of funny to have Human Resources under Finance, but it's F&A.
All right. We'll definitely put that in. We have 3 dotted lines. Dotted indicates a direct access and direct involvement as we move forward with the discussion of the organization. The first one is the Ombudsman, and the reason that direct reporting line is there is really to take into consideration the Ombudsman's role, not just today, but probably in the future as well. The Ombudsman is the liaison for communities, but in the future also will probably be the individual that's in a position to react to complaints that's received against the casinos, and it just helps to provide both the public and the communities visual effect that there is a direct line to the commission where it's necessary for those complaints. So I want to make sure that I touch briefly on why that dotted line is there. Legal Division, of course, the dotted line is there is because legal counsel, chief counsel, is the counsel to the commission directly. Consequently, it makes sense that communication be in place as well. And of course, media relations. Our media office at this point is directly involved with the commissioners and the chairman in particular regarding media issues. So this is to demonstrate as well that connection and communication. As time wears on and the commission moves out of this award period, some of that emphasis may change over time, but it seemed like the appropriate spot to pause with the organization, at least where we're at since we completed our hiring. We've got personnel in place and request the commission to approve it at this point. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Derek can jump in with me if there's something I can't answer.
Any questions, any issues?
Well, one thought was that this is a very flat organization with a lot of direct reports to you, Director. Ironically, I don't know which ones I would reshuffle or consolidate or restructure. Plus, it's effectively how we have been operating to a large degree. It's essentially what we have. The only thing I would ask us to consider is, with that in mind, as we grow it, how can we make it as efficient as possible and as reflective of where we need to be as well. So.
Yes, and I think Commissioner Zuniga and I have had chances to talk, and I know we've also had these discussions with the chairman. As part of, as we move this organization forward in its structure, we want to, and bring positions on, we want to do so only in a fashion that reflects the regulatory process we need to engage in and be ready to serve the industry like we have to in the end. We don't want to grow too fast and too quick and ultimately have people that are on board but with not too much to do. As we add to, because some of our largest additions will eventually be the Investigation and Enforcement Bureau, which will then probably at the end make it one of the largest, if not the largest division in the agency, and how that will actually impact how the total agency will look in the future will need to be taken a look at then. And as we move forward, we'll keep looking at each one of these sections to make sure that there isn't more appropriate organizational structure. But at this point, it is a flat organization, which from my perspective is actually good as we're moving forward initially. Gives me the more opportunity to be involved too with what's going on, and I think it reduces the number of steps you have to go to get an answer in the organization. And so I think where we're at right now, this is very reflective of how things are moving forward, and I would encourage them to continue in that fashion at this point.
Great.
I am also very conscious I have to add the 3 reporting lines. I would want to indicate that the Ombudsman and the Office of Communication, they do an awful lot of communication, as you know, in response to the Commission. So it would be inappropriate to say that I'm in direct touch with them every day of the week, right? That would be a misrepresentation. So.
Which helps a little bit on,
Yes,
on the
does.
problem that Commissioner Zuniga is addressing. I think it's great. I think it's non-controversial, other than the point that the Commissioner brought up and you've already been anticipating. So I don't think you need a vote on this. I mean, this is your job. But I mean, it looks great. And in addition, all those people are really good. That's, even more important than where the boxes are. So
We have been fortunate to assemble a great team.
yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Great.
It's a great team.
Thank you. We'll move forward with that fashion, and then as we continue to evolve, we'll bring some. We'll have to be doing each division, each structure, and it's my plan at least to bring those forward to the Commission and brief you about where we're at.
Great.
That brings me to internet gaming, and behind the tab 7C, you will find a draft. The Commission has previously held informational forums on topics like responsible gaming, horse racing, designed to enhance our knowledge and to inform future decisions of the Commission. Several states have now moved forward with different forms of internet gambling, and this spring seems like it'd be a good time to take the opportunity to bring a forum regarding internet gaming to Massachusetts. So what we have included here is a proposed agenda for a proposed March forum on internet gambling. The proposal lists the topics, and I just want to touch on those real quick. The idea is to begin with what is internet gaming and social gaming, to have a demonstration and a discussion, the comparison to social gaming, so as people move forward, they have a knowledge of what the difference is. To to bring forward speakers to talk about the state of gambling nationally and around the globe, and also fit in the legal status of internet gaming in Massachusetts. Hopefully we'll be able to touch on what money laundering and problem gaming, which seem to be two consistent issues that are much more difficult to deal with relative to internet gaming, and how the industry has either found it to be a problem or has attempted to deal with it as we move forward. We want to move forward with a panel discussion. Of course, we have states that are presently have different combinations. One's doing internet poker only. Other two states have different combinations. Hopefully we can tap people from those states to talk about how the structures are developed and how those processes are actually, to the extent they can, how they've actually been working in their states. And then we want to, hopefully we can bring in the topic of lottery and internet gambling, so there is some discussion involved here about how the lottery might be involved or be impacted. And in the end, we're hopeful that we'll be able to obtain some comments on how the industry might see internet gaming being part of a brick and mortar casino concept. So it's a little bit like this is what's the structure of casinos is going to be in Massachusetts. How may internet gambling fit in with the statutory and the gaming structure here in Massachusetts itself? So that we have now just outlined. We haven't outlined speakers. The idea, Commissioner McHugh and I, is that we would run this agenda by you, see if it's a direction you wanted us to go, and then we would begin the search for speakers that would go under each topic. And with that, Commissioner McHugh, I'm sure you would have some articulate comments on
No articulate comments. Commissioner Zuniga, after this was distributed, not Commissioner Zuniga, Commissioner Stebbins suggested, and it's a good suggestion, that the 11 to 12 o'clock topic include underage gambling and geolocation, making sure that there wasn't any cross-border gambling. And I think we can and should broaden that topic to include that issue as well, but we can do that. And the only other thing is that we want to, if the commission approves this outline, if you will, reach out to the lottery and invite them to participate in thinking about this, and certainly in the 2 to 3 o'clock segment where we talk about the lottery and the brick and mortar people. So if this is approved, we'll reach out to them and see what role, if any, they want to participate in. I would hope they would. I mean, this has got to be, and we've thought about this from the beginning, from the time that you, Commissioner Zuniga, and you, Mr. Chairman, were on the Treasurer's Task Force. We've thought about an holistic approach to this. It remains our goal to have an holistic approach, and so we need their help and input and participation to figure out what that should be. The overall idea of this is to introduce the topic to Massachusetts in some kind of a descriptive form, not as an advocacy piece, but just here it is, and we got to be thinking about this, and invite not only the community, media, but also legislators to come down and participate in the conversation and in thinking about this, because it's here, it's going to continue to be here, it's going to continue to play ever-increasing roles. We need to know about it and think about it, and think about the impact it's likely to have. So that's what this is designed to do.
I think the program looks excellent. I really look forward to learning more about this topic, and now that there are 3 states and some provinces that are undertaking this, I think it becomes even more timely as well as more informative now that there are test cases out there. So I know we don't have a date yet, is that correct? We're waiting to see sometime in March?
We do have a March 11th.
March
we do,
11th,
I'm sorry.
tentatively.
Is our
Okay.
tentative date.
March 11th is tentative. Okay,
Yes.
great. No, I think this program looks excellent, and I, for one, look forward to it.
And I would hope with a panel discussion and representatives from other states that we would be able to get information about the topics we're talking about, really about the underage, money laundering too, and the geolocation, identification. There's There's quite interesting methodologies that are going in all
Yeah,
directions.
it's really fascinating on a number of levels. It's-
Do we anticipate to have industry participants? Some of our applicants, for example, or
We did not anticipate having our applicant participants. We were, if you're from our speakers, I think we were going to attempt to tap sources that weren't in contention in Massachusetts. At least I thought that's what our basic direction was.
Yeah, I think that's our basic direction.
Yes.
It'd be worthwhile to think through one topic here where, but the presumption is no.
I actually had a different expectation. I was about to ask the same question, but from the other side. You know, we'll have one licensee, first of all, and they will certainly have an interest in this as a licensee, not an applicant. But I was thinking that on the industry perspective, how does internet gaming coexist with or amplify the business of brick and mortars? That what we care most about are those people who
We license.
likely be within our licensing oversights. So I'm less interested in knowing what somebody who does business in Mississippi thinks than I am about the people who we might be overseeing. So I was going to suggest that maybe we would only have applicants or licensees, at least on that last panel, but.
That's the one that I was thinking we needed to
Yeah,
discuss
okay.
further. That's the area. I mean, it's an intriguing idea.
or if it's, industry association representatives, the AGA has been with us in a couple of different ways before. But I think I'm most interested in the last session, also in social gaming, by the way.
Yeah.
But,
And that's consistent with, excuse me if I interrupted you.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
Well, that's just, we've made a point of saying that whatever happens in Massachusetts, we think that our licensees ought to be at the table, because they're gonna have just made a huge investment on our behalf. And whatever we do relative to internet gaming, we need to make sure that we've at least seriously considered their points of view. So to involve them early on would be compatible with that viewpoint. The other thing that occurs to me is, I wonder, at least in our mind's eye, if maybe not on the program, but it would be nice to have sort of a next step in mind. We don't want to. This will be great. I'm really looking forward to this. I think we'll learn a tremendous amount. But everything moves so fast, that, and the world is moving so quickly around us, that we might want to think about designating one of our existing staff people to take on internet gaming as to work with Commissioner McHugh, who's kind of the point person at the commission level, or something, to put together a work group made up of X, Y, and Z. I don't know what, but I think we might want to, at least hard on the heels of this, if not during this, think about next steps. What do we do with this? Where do we go next?
Yeah, I think that's a terrific idea, because it is moving very fast, and whatever we do, we need to be current on what's happening and how to deal with it.
Right.
Okay, we will move forward with and I've taken the input has been, even that last topic in particular, this probably goes towards speakers from either the applicants or licensee would probably be the most.
Yeah. And obviously, even-handed if there's
Yeah,
if it's a competitive situation that everybody needs to be in.
Right,
Okay,
right.
we will move forward with those additions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's exciting.
That brings me to item 7D, draft regulations for cost assessment. Just a couple brief comments. We have been working on an effective method for assessing commission costs for several months. We made several changes since our first draft, and we think this proposal it's much more fleshed out. As you might, part of the concerns we've had, of course, is trying to find some way for fair distribution. The other side of it has been trying to make sure we've got 121 already in place, and so we want these regulations to work together without any duplication, and make sure there's a process for refund or credit. With that, I would like to defer over to Derek and ask him to go through a quick summary of the proposal that's before.
Thank you. What you have in your packet is a brief memo outlining, can you hear that?
A little closer.
All right, what you have in your packet is a brief memo outlining what this regulation is doing. We also had 2 responses to our request for public comment. Those responses are in there as well. And we have the current regulation and the law that allows us to assess our costs. As the commission is well aware, we were established with a $15 million appropriation of startup costs. We're allowed to charge back the cost of investigations, and then the rest of our costs are generated either through licensing fees, additional investigations once casinos are up and running, or assessing our costs back on our licensees. There's no other revenue source for us. So this regulation is pretty important for our ability to continue operations. So what's included in it is an annual budget process. Sets our fiscal year, July 1 through June 30th, including the accounts payable period. It gives us some timing of when we will go through our budget, hopefully develop one before June 1st so that we can bill our licensees within 30 days after that, have money to begin on July 1, because also the trust fund that created us does not allow us to spend in a deficit. So we always have to have positive cash balance on hand. So that's the reason that we put the timing that June 1st has to be when we do our budget every year, so we'll always have money by July 1 when our books open up. And then what it's done is create the annual slot fee, which is created by statute, Section 56A, I think it is. Yeah, Section 56A of the Chapter 23K requires us to charge $600 per approved slot on July 1, and then there's a prorated piece where if we approve a slot or an increase in slots throughout the year, we can charge based on that $600 on a prorated basis. We've defined that as to be a daily prorated basis. So you'd take the number of days out of 365 that we approved it, multiply it by the 600, and that would be their fee. The third piece is the operating cost assessment, which is our biggest one, because we can charge, like I said, can charge licensing fees, we can charge a slot fee, and then the balance between what our cost estimate is for the year and those revenues that we're going to generate is what we have to assess back to our licensees. And that's based on their share of the total amount of gaming positions that we've approved. Another sections in there is the Public Health Trust Fund, which is required. We have to contribute at least $5 million a year to the Public Health Trust Fund. We are responsible for collecting that money and then transferring it over. Once again, that goes by the share of gaming positions, each licensee share of gaming positions. And then we have a section in there that makes sure applicants and licensees are aware that we won't double bill them in any year. So there's a current regulation on the books that allows us to charge a piece of an assessment, a slot fee, and if we so determined, a contribution to the Public Health Trust Fund when we license our applicants, when we license our operators. This is just letting people know we won't hit you with that fee and then the annual assessment fee in the same, for costs occurring in the same fiscal year.
Say that again, Derek.
So there's a regulation that was written prior to my joining here. It's already on the books, 205 CMR 121, that allows us with the licensing fee of $25 million for a slots parlor or $85 million for a resort casino to charge for our cost assessment. So if there's a gap in our revenues for the year compared to what our expenses are going to be, as well as a slot fee for every machine that's approved in the application. Then there's another piece to it which we could discuss whether it's needed or not, especially in the first year, that would allow us to charge the $5 million contribution to the Public Health Trust Fund. Since that's on our books this year, there's a discussion of whether we would need to do that for any FY14 people that are licensed. If it happened in FY15 and we were to, the way we've written up the regulation as well is we've allowed the commission to determine when we'd want to start assessing for the $5 million transfer to the Public Health Trust Fund. Our problem gambling division and our problem gaming division has a large piece of their budget that would either come from the Public Health Trust Fund or we'd have to build it into our own budget. So that's a discussion that we could have with the commission. How we'd want to do that. Do we want to assess it or do we want to just build it into our budget until we figure out how that transfer will work and the MOUs will work in the future?
And what was the,
Well, the specific question that you may be asking, Mr. Chairman, was Derek was clarifying that we have an existing regulation that will allow us to assess them as soon as we issue a license for our costs. But there's also a practical timeline for that assessment, and that's July 1. And as we're
what do you mean
facing,
it's a practical time?
well, because we have a trust fund that cannot be spent on the deficit. So every year, we have to make an annual assessment. That's also a statutory requirement.
Where's the trust fund?
The gaming revenue fund is a...
Gaming Control Fund.
The gaming control fund.
Oh, that's where the $15 million.
Yes,
Correct.
that's where we use.
Got it.
That,
Okay,
by comptroller rules,
Okay.
cannot go into the deficit.
okay.
So when you overlay those requirements, Derek is clarifying that our applicants would not be assessed twice or doubled assessed if they get assessed prior to July 1st because they were awarded a license before then, and then on July 1st because now we have gone through the yearly assessment process. Is that a fair
Correct.
summary?
I think it's designed, we're making sure the duplication is not.
Don't
between-
exist.
Yeah.
There's 2 fiscal years and 2 regulations, so the regulation 121 deals with, will attach to the award the remaining costs that we have for fiscal 2014.
For that year, right.
Yeah, if we issue one license or we subsequently issue others in that same fiscal year, then we'll reimburse balance out the payments according to prorated.
Well, I understood that. I didn't understand the double billing part, but it doesn't really matter as long as we're not going to double bill, so.
We're not gonna,
Correct.
right. It mostly has to do with timing on this fiscal year and the next, which are hopefully gonna be steady state years.
Right, okay.
And this is the first year is going to be the touchiest or the most difficult to manage.
The odd one.
Once we get to the annual assessment part, that'll be much clearer.
Right, once we have a bunch of licensees.
Correct. We have a section that deals with annual reconciliation of expenditures to revenues that basically states if we ever over-collect, we'll make sure that we either refund back to the licensees the difference, or we will credit their next year's assessment. And that's also contemplated in the law. And then there's a final piece that just says the format that payments must be made in, and a clause that says we have remedies if they're not paid. I mean, as far as the public comments go, we received comments from all of the Category 2 applicants with concerns about the fairness of how we would go about billing, as well as the implications to putting in an annual assessment when they're not up and running yet. So there's some concerns there. But as I noted before, we're given $15 million to start with. The only places we can generate revenues are either through our investigations or our licensing and our assessments. So.
Well, yeah, that's a point that, you know, I would emphasize. This is particularly critical to the Category 2 applicants for a number of reasons, and let me summarize. They are the first ones that will be licensed, and given our schedule. But they have a higher tax rate than the Category 1s, and a smaller lifetime of the license by which to recover their initial investments. So, and they're also limited by the number of slot machines that they can have. So the financials, the return on investment for the Category 2 is quite different from the Category 1. And the prospect, which is not our intention, but the prospect of the one Category 2 carrying a lot of the burden initially is, as some of them commented, perhaps unfair or disproportionate. I wouldn't call it unfair, perhaps disproportionate. So that bears into the discussion. I think it's a comment duly noted, but by necessity, we would assess our costs on the licensees that we have when we have them, and try to make the most fairness in terms of apportioning costs as fair as we can.
But go ahead.
Well, I guess I had, I think that the letters that we got from the three Category 2 applicants were very thoughtful. And I don't accept their position vis-a-vis the tax, the license fee for the slot machines. I think we can do that as soon as we authorize them. The others, though, the other assessment has, it seems to me, a number of problems that they identified, a number of issues that they identified, one of which is the fairness issue. Them carrying a structure and a set of costs that would be wholly unnecessary if we were only dealing with them. And there is the issue of the statutory language saying gaming positions at. We've been through that. We've thought that through. I think but it is a problem. And so and then there's the third piece is, however you do this, is it fair to do this up front or are quarterly or semi-annual payments along the way a more equitable and fair way so that they can, however we wind up on this, pay out of generated revenues once we get up and rolling. Right now, it seems I would really like to think about that second piece, the taxing of all of our expenses, operating expenses, to them when it's clear that a big chunk of those expenses are the product of us gearing up to deal with the casinos and not with them. I don't have a specific answer to it, but I do think it's a problem.
Well,
I think we need to talk about it.
One thought is what we're doing or what we're facing is a deficit for this year, but we're also facing a licensing this year, and it's probably more than one. In all likelihood, more than 3 licensees we will have this year.
This fiscal year.
This fiscal year.
Right.
And it's particularly this fiscal year and whatever gap we may need to assess this year that is at question here. And the months in between the awards, for example, may account for some difference that we can always offset or try to apportion proportionately. Another way to think about it as well is of all of our budget that we have been incurring since our inception, really, but especially for this fiscal year, to try to quantify all the investments that we have made that are directly related for the future, to the future or to everybody in the future, like our investments in technology or our licensing system. Those are more forward-looking. We have to do them now, but they have a duration and they have a life that applies to everybody. All of those costs could be segregated into a purely proportional assessment. We may have to rely on whoever we have at the time we have them as licensees, but everybody would be assured that all of those costs are being, apportioned fairly and proportionately.
Doesn't the statute limit that for us? Statute? How can, was this?
Well, for the annual assessment, it has to be based on the year's costs. And one of the ideas, I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't, that's been tossed around, was that for the licensing fee, we could hit up an initial assessment on the first person.
Which fee are you talking about?
The licensing fee,
The
so.
one-time 25
The
million?
one-time 25 million that also has the an assessment clause built in, a slot fee clause built in, but it's a one-time hit, and then you go to the annual assessment. But for those, you could build in a condition of licensure that you have to pay back your proportional share for what the FY14 base was, so that the first licensee would get a repayment. It may not be right away, but as we license a second, third, possibly fourth, they would get their piece back based on the total proportional pool of positions. And that wouldn't fall under the annual assessment, so I think that that's where we'd have some flexibility there. And the way we have written the regulation doesn't require us, and we could leave this up to the commission for a billing period of when we would, so we determine the assessment as of hopefully before June 1st, so that we could start our billing cycle within 30 days and get some money in. But we could bill on a monthly, quarterly, semi-annual basis a share of that assessment, which would alleviate some of their cash flow issues, but it puts us once again in the position of, if I'm looking at our financial standpoint, it puts us in the position of chasing because we never have the ability to spend in a deficit. So we can never go in the red.
But I don't think we ought to build a system which assumes that we're going to be chasing. And we could have a pretty serious penalty in there for people who don't pay on time. I think
Correct.
we should assume we're going to get paid on time and build the systems on that. And if somebody's jerking us around, then we have a penalty system in place. But we're going to get paid on time. This is not going to be chasing payables business. If we get all the licenses awarded this year, which we plan to, which we hope to, then the concerns of the Category 2 people are much less. They were really concerned about the possibility that it's unknown, how long might this extend? And I understood better after I read their memos than when I talked to you about it yesterday, Derek. But it does seem to me that their notion of borrowing from the Pennsylvania model, but rather than going to the legislature, we use the rainy day fund. We've got the rainy day fund, $20 million. We've already decided that the language permits us not to pay it back immediately. What always hung me up on that was if we use the rainy day fund for a while, how would we get it back? But the bidders have said that in Pennsylvania, it was essentially it was a mortgage. I mean, they essentially paid back pro rata over a period of time, so it wasn't a big hit. But the Pennsylvania Loan Fund, or in our case, the Rainy Day Fund, would get its money back. It would just take a little while. So to me, that's the simplest by far, to assume we're going to hang on to that 20 million till we're out of the soup, and use that to cover whatever the downside. Don't penalize the Category 2 people. Use the Rainy Day Fund. And then we can figure out the details of how you allocate shares going forward, and there'll be some tricks in there, but that seems to me to be by far the fairest and simplest, and it always looked like it was an easy solution. I just couldn't figure out how you could back bill for time gone by, but the industry has already said there's a norm for that, and have recommended that we use that model. So, I mean, that almost, for at least for a year or so, that puts the problem to bed pretty much.
I agree with that, subject to the mechanics of figuring out how you repay it. It seems to me that's by far the fairest. Then we can go ahead and, we could even make an assessment, it seems to me, on the Category 2, licensee by looking, if we somehow didn't get all the licenses awarded this year, looking at all the gaming positions posited in the applicants, taking some mean and using a proportional that runs off of that, and then truing it up later after the licenses are actually awarded and they're up and running. But somehow dipping into the rainy, not dipping into, using the holding it, and then repaying it later. It seems to me that's the cleanest, fairest, best way to go.
Might be, as we move, I think we've been talking about, as if we were going to move this proposal forward, we probably, practically speaking, it'd be a good idea to attach it with another package. And so we anticipated doing that with the self-exclusion, and we're in the process of going back and making corrections in the self-exclusion group, bringing it back. That would give us time to take a look at the concept of the rainy day fund and how it would practically, what fund it's in and how it would practically be able to be counted on in the budget, especially given we have anticipate remaining costs in this fiscal year, and then significant costs in fiscal year 15. So I think we need to take a real close look to see if those funds handle the problem in addition.
Right.
But if that's something the commission could be interested in, we could just kind of hold on to this and plan on a target of moving it forward when the self-exclusion regs are ready to go. In the meantime, we can do some analysis on the rainy day fund and tweak up the two regulations and see what we need to do from there.
That makes sense to me.
That makes sense to me, too. Be great.
We will do that. Thank you.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if they're here, but thank you for the folks who sent us the memos, because they were really helpful.
Yeah, they were very thoughtful and very helpful.
Mr. Chairman, that brings me to tax withholding, and I know we were anticipating some additional information, and we've done some initial talks about the tax withholding issue. I don't know if we're ready to do more discussion today, or if we want to move that.
I can give you my 2 cents worth. We have got a submission of anybody else who's here from bidders. We are taking very seriously the concern about the withholding tax issue that has been raised by multiple parties. Any bidders who want to give us information that helps us put together the background on this issue, we will appreciate it. We've gotten information from WIN. I got some very helpful stuff from AGA. Jennifer has put together a lot of information relative to from the Perry Mutual perspective, and we're waiting for a document from HLT. So we're getting very close. When we get the HLT document in, then we can start to pull together a proposal for us to look at, for the commission to look at. And I think in our mind's eye, we're sort of agreeing so far tentatively with the industry's concern. We wanted to get together, real facts and a real serious understanding before we went to the legislature. So I would hope that we could get that together within a couple weeks. As soon as we get the HLT piece in, then I think we can get moving. And if anybody else out there has comments on, particularly, equity issues across the country, our proposed legislation is so much more onerous than virtually any other jurisdiction in the country, but any other information on that, or what the likely negative consequences would be of this, that would be helpful to us. So that's where we're at. I hope that, we have told the legislature that we're concerned about this. They have heard about it as well. They've asked us for feedback. So I think the ball's really on our court to take the lead on how we think what the response should be.
Would you like me to put it on agenda, bring it back on the 23rd?
Yeah.
At that point?
Yeah. with putting the pressure on me, but,
It's a switch.
yeah, right.
Okay, with that, I believe unless the commission has additional questions with me, that's the end of my report. And I think we're at item 8, Legal Division, Catherine Blue.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So in your commission package under tab 8, we have a draft of the proposed form of license agreement. I want to make a couple of general comments about it before we go through it in a little detail. The first comment is I want to thank Danielle and Artem for their work on this document. I tasked them with taking a look at what we've done for racing, and then asked them to comb through the statute and the other regulations and other thoughts that we've had on this and put it together into a document that would have at least a concise form. And they've done that, and they've done an excellent job with that, so I want to thank them for their work on it. Second is that this is really the first of probably several discussions on what form this license will take. I want to stress for the commission's benefit and for those of the folks who are here today and who are watching us that there's nothing in this document that is necessarily cast in stone, nor should anyone think that it implies any particular decisions have been made by the commission either way. What I did was I asked Danielle and Artem to put in everything that they could think of in a format so the commission could see it. So it is at this point probably overly broad. Some of the items highlighted in yellow, for example, are things that we would like the commission to focus on and give us some feedback and guidance on, but it doesn't mean that the commission has particularly made decisions on those items, so I just don't want folks to get concerned. Also, if folks that are watching or reviewing this have comments, we're certainly open to comments on that as well. This is set up to look like a license for a Category 2, but it would be the basis for what we would do with Category 1 as well. So as we go through it, what you will see is it's broken into different sections. The first one is the authority, and that's the authority under which the commission can grant the license. We have a section on background that will discuss the process of how the commission got to the point of issuing an award. We have a section on findings. The findings come in a couple of different in two different parts. The first section on findings lists all of the statutory considerations that the commission has to review before it can issue a license. And then there is a section on findings, and this is the section that's highlighted in yellow, where we thought it might be appropriate for the commission to include the findings it makes for a particular license. So these are based on the evaluation criteria, but they are obviously flexible and we can make changes here if necessary. But we thought it was also helpful too, because the statute requires that the commission issue findings of fact for situations where a license is denied. We're thinking that it might also be helpful to have specific findings of fact for the license that is awarded as well. And so we've included that in the form. And we've set it up, in the beginning to mirror what the evaluation criteria and sections were. So it's something for the commission to look at. We have a section on what we call the award and the scope of licensing. One of the things I want to point out in this section is that we will define what the gaming establishment is for that particular licensee. Listening to our other regulations this morning and seeing the other regulations we have under review and under draft, we will need to make sure that this definition works with the other regulations we have going into effect. So it's a key definition. You'll see a section on ownership and control. These ownership, control, construction, opening requirements, operation, records and reporting, these are all requirements that come out of our statute. They also will have reference to regulations that we have not yet drafted but will be on those topics. Likewise, for issues regarding enforcement. We threw in a section on racing. We understand that not every applicant will have a racing component, but we wanted that in here so we could look at that language in the event that we do have an applicant that's awarded that has a racing piece.
Catherine, this might be an overreaction, but we want to be so sensitive to not giving any appearance of anything. And you've said it 2 or 3 different times, and I know what you mean, but maybe the racing section should be, you know, applicable only in the event, somehow or other, we don't want any way to imply that we're sort of presuming, and I know you've said this,
No,
but
that's
there are,
correct.
you know, maybe it should be on the front page or something, that I don't want anybody who's doesn't have racing in their application to get their hair on end that, you know, we're saying something here, because I know we absolutely are not, and just, we can't overemphasize that point.
We can add a legend to the front page that
So,
talks
yeah.
about that. There's a number of situations where we're not trying to imply, but we would want to throw it all. So we can add
Okay,
some
I think
language to that.
that'd be good.
And then you'll see there's sections on responsible gaming. When you get to page 13, there's a very key section, and we label that licensee-specific conditions. This is where the commission would insert those conditions that are unique to that particular licensee. And they could be any number of things. One of the things that I think we will include here is any specific conditions that came up in suitability, for example. So if a suitability determination had certain reporting requirements, we could insert them in this section of the license if we thought that was appropriate. But there may be other very specific conditions that we have for a particular licensee. Then we took other, what we call other, and these are conditions that are in our statute. They don't fall into any one particular type of category, but they are things that our statute requires. We put those in there. So this is the general format. We welcome your comments and your direction.
I thought this was a very good start, and you and I have talked about a couple of the issues. I certainly look at this document as somewhat the basis for a report card of where we review this license and its ability to be renewed after the 5-year period. Something that stood out for me that was missing, or maybe it was meant not to be included, is some requirement or some obligation to the licensee of meeting their obligations in both the host community and surrounding community agreements, as well as the impacted live entertainment venue agreements. We continue to hear and always have the question posed to us as to how are we going to make sure there's teeth either in the agreement or in the ultimate license document. But I think it would maybe reassure the communities out there that reflecting on the host community agreements and the surrounding community agreements give it a little more teeth as part of the license package.
We can definitely add that language.
Did Artem and, was it Danielle?
Danielle.
Yeah. Look at other state regions, other jurisdictions' licenses?
We didn't in particular. We started with the format that we use for racing, but we can definitely do that. I have looked a little bit at some of New Jersey's, for example. They're decisional, but we can look more closely at what they include and how they draft it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be very important. I'm not sure what it tells us, but we won't know until we see it. But particularly the more recent jurisdictions that have gone through bidding processes of one sort or another, I'm flying blind here, but the concern that strikes me is we've got this situation where we have said that the license is awarded with the vote, and the 30 days runs from the vote on. But if we give them a 15-page document, very different from anything they've ever seen before in other jurisdictions, they're going to want to negotiate the document, of course. And what happens if it doesn't get done within 30 days? And I mean, I can see a lot of issues there. So two things. One is this more or less the same as other jurisdictions? That will help. But also, I think, and this is what you're doing now, is put this out to comment, and we want this needs to be essentially pre-approved because we've got such a short time frame between the license award and a non-refundable multi-million-dollar deposit. So getting feedback will be great, and people will see it, and people are going to be aware of it. But I think making sure that we're not too outside the norm of, you could have, anyway, you get my drift. So I think that would be helpful.
Yep, we can do that.
I agree with that, although most of the license conditions are statutory requirements. So whether they're in the license or someplace else, there's not a lot of negotiating room for many of them. It's the licensee-specific ones which probably are there. On a minor level, is there a lottery section in here? I didn't see it quickly.
I don't believe there's a separate lottery section. There is a language from the statute on compliance, but we can make it a separate lottery section if that helps.
No, I only meant, is there a reference to being a lottery agent?
Yes.
Agree
Yes.
as well.
Okay. I had a thematic thought, and that is that the background findings all the way through page, the end of page 6, I think is a terrific framework for the decision. But I doubt that it belongs in the license. The Pennsylvania model, for example, took in, and they've done competitive awards, took this kind of format and had a separate document in which they discussed all three and made on each of the criteria. I'm not sure we want to do all 210, but at least the criteria, made comparative analyses and told why they chose one rather than another. Something like that I think we ought to do. I don't think it belongs in here. And I think that it confuses and raises the possibility of serious misunderstandings if, for example, there's a conflict between something in the statute and some license not something in the statute, some license condition and some finding we've made, or somebody beginning to read something from the findings of fact into an interpretation of the requirements of the license. So I would take that part out, although I'd keep it as a terrific structure to think about as we think about putting together the findings of fact that we're going to use to accompany this. And then my only other question was on, a thought and question was on page 13, and I didn't really understand what paragraph 48, the highlighted paragraph, was intended to do.
So paragraph 48 comes out of our section 23K17F in our regulation 11806.
Right.
This has to do with the MIPA filings and findings that are made under that particular statute. So we do need to look at this more. I mean, this is in our statute, but I think we need to flesh it out to make it more understandable. But having just what our statute says is not as helpful as it could be.
Okay, fair enough. So that's really a placeholder,
Yes.
because the license needs to have the licensee shall or follow what the commission says or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So those are my comments, my thoughts. It's
Catherine?
exciting to take a look at this and
Yeah. It is.
realize that, you know, we're actually getting down to this level, right?
Catherine, what's the purpose of putting in the background?
To set out really a timeline of what we did and how we did it. When you look at our statute, I was looking at it again this morning, when you look at our statute, it assumes that we had one process that we bifurcated. So our statute talks about when you issue the license, you put in the suitability findings, for example. Well, we already have a separate suitability decision. So the background allows us to kind of spell out the processes we went through. It's not mandatory, but it just does kind of describe that what the process was and how we got to it.
Okay.
Feels to me a little bit like that's the same stuff as you were saying.
No, I would put the background in the findings that we.
That's what I'm saying, so he's,
Right.
you're agreeing with Jim's.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important, but elsewhere.
Yeah. Would you be sure, you, Todd, or John, somebody be sure that this goes out to all remaining applicants
Yes.
to get comments? Might even no harm in people that are applicants in Region C too. You know, we want as much comment and pre-awareness of this as possible.
We can do that, and we can post it as well
Yeah,
for comment, so we'll do both.
yeah, okay. Great, that's exciting.
Yeah.
This would there also be a little certificate they could hang on the wall?
Yes, there is
I was
a
about to
posting
say, this is going to be
requirement.
tough to stick in a frame.
You know, you wouldn't want the 13 pages like laid out or anything on the wall. So yes, we will do something akin to what Racing did.
Actually, I think Director Driscoll, you might put Jackrabbit to work on a license.
Right.
Right,
Maybe a
it's gonna
big
be-
certificate.
Yeah, a big certificate, something that works around that logo.
Yeah,
With our signatures.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you.
all right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
And now, Director Glennon.
I wasn't sure you were going to get to me, so thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I have a bit of an opening set of remarks here. One of the first assignments that Executive Director Day gave to me when I came on board was to evaluate the gaming laboratory operations in other jurisdictions and to make a recommendation to the Commission for an operating model for a gaming laboratory to serve the Commission and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm here before you today to report out on what I've learned over the past few months about the current state of the gaming device regulation, best practices and innovative approaches by other jurisdictions, and the use of uniform standards and technology to modernize their ability to regulate. During the course of my due diligence, I have visited gaming laboratories in Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Washington. I've initiated open and transparent discussions with two of the industry's prominent independent test laboratories. We like to use acronyms, so ITLs. Several major manufacturers of gaming devices, and actually one of them has sent representatives here today. There are two representatives from IGT in the audience, and the Gaming Standards Association. So in your package, you have a trip report as well as an addendum kind of articulating that these conversations have been held. Next slide, please. So Chapter 66 of 26K gives the Commission the flexibility to create a gaming laboratory operating model that best meets the needs of the Commonwealth from both a fiscal and regulatory perspective. We truly have a greenfield opportunity to use technology to provide an automated workflow for business processes involving operators, manufacturers, and independent test laboratories. We should take advantage of the ability to reconcile the previous day's transactions and collect revenue daily. I honestly believe we have the opportunity to use best practices model that will provide a superior ability to monitor, audit, and regulate. An effective operating model should include collaborative workflow processes that enable timely processing of slot and casino operators' license applications for gaming devices to operate in a Massachusetts facility. Next slide, please. So these are basically the people that I talked to. I think it was a 360 discussion. We talked with, we looked at other models around the country, and there's a lot of different models. I think they vary widely. In a study of 25 states, 22 states use independent test laboratories, 10 use independent test laboratories and operate a state gaming laboratory, and only 3 in the study, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and I put Pennsylvania twice, so I don't know what the other state. New Jersey, operate gaming laboratories and don't formally use ITLs. 13 states only use ITLs and do not have gaming laboratory operations. It's clear there's a wide variety of operating models in the country. Each is tailored to meet the best needs of the jurisdiction. My recommendation is to take the best practices of these operating models and create a hybrid model that works for Massachusetts. Can I have the next slide, please? So basically, three types of models. A full-service gaming laboratory, where all the testing and the certification is done by the state. And another model is the fully outsourced model, where the dependence for both the certification and the approval is contracted to the independent test laboratories. And what I'm going to recommend today is a hybrid model where we leverage the ability of the independent test laboratories to do the majority of the work in testing, but leave the option open to test or retest, in a laboratory of our own. Okay. So I'm recommending that we hire a gaming laboratory manager immediately. I think regardless of how the model evolves, how much square footage we allocate and how we operate, we're going to need subject matter expertise to contract with and develop a vendor relationship with these independent test laboratories. So I think it's important that we have that person on our staff, and I think we need them in order to be able to respond to the license that's going to be issued for the slot parlors in February. Further, I'm going to recommend that the commission allocate space in our primary location for a gaming laboratory that's equipped with the infrastructure to set up and test any device or platform that operators want to install in their facilities in our state. With regards to the size of the lab, the current FIT plans have a placeholder, but I think the final square footage and other relevant operating costs still need to be determined. We've asked for and received input from other states about their costs and revenue from testing services, and as a part of the budgeting process currently underway with CFAO, Lennon will develop an operating budget for the lab and bring that back to you. I think, I'm not going to go through the bullet points on the slide that's up there, but there's any number of good reasons why a hybrid model, I think, is optimal for the Commonwealth. I've had conversations with each of you. You have briefing material in your packet, and I will entertain any questions about the recommendation at this time.
So the recommendation at this point, as I understand it, is simply to endorse a hybrid model with the details and costs and time and phase-in, I suppose is the better word, to be forthcoming.
Yes.
Okay.
What is the, well, a couple things. Go ahead if you have.
No,
Yeah.
no, I was just going to say, in principle and conceptually, I like the idea of the hybrid model. I think it's the safest from a where to start perspective. I don't know that we could be on either end of the spectrum of the continuum to begin with, either contracting everything out without getting a lot of knowledge in-house, or developing something right up front with an imminent approval process before us. But having said that, I'm very interested in the details that are forthcoming relative to what you mean by the activities that would take place and how much that would cost. And I think, of course, there's a learning curve that we will benefit from initially, and for which we need to be prepared, and hiring someone soon is also important. But I look forward to those details as you continue your research in terms of and budgeting, including space allocation, by the way. Which reminds me, why do we feel it's necessary that space be allocated in the primary location of the, you mentioned the primary location.
I'm going to answer that, and then I'm also going to ask Rick to weigh in. But we had some conversations about locating the facility off-site. One of the reasons to even put machines in addition to wanting to be able to do additional testing or testing, is for education of our staff and for training. And I think to have the facility and to be able to manage the activities of that facility, especially if it's under my oversight, I would want that co-located where our operations are, and not in some satellite location away. I mean, out in Las Vegas, I think the labs are close to the manufacturers and even the commission. They're all kind of in one area, but I don't think that makes sense to be for us to have a lab outside of where we're operating, where the people that are working for the commission are. So, Dr. Day?
John, I don't have too much to add, but I think one of the points was just from a practical basis. If we were, this proposal away somewhere. But what we're really talking about is a much smaller operation, and for the cost difference, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to locate it in another location for several dollars unknown reduction in cost, as opposed to making sure that we have an agency that's all together in one place. We aren't duplicating communications channels, we aren't wasting staff time driving back and forth trying to make conversations and make it efficient. I think we'd end up saving a little bit of money, but we'd lose a lot in the consistency and clarity of our operation. Now, obviously, I think if we were to locate the entire agency at a location outside of our current area, there would be savings that might be significant. But on the other hand, we have a lot of loss on relative to where we have the agency overall. So the simple thing is it seems to me the space we're looking at this point is small enough that it best be incorporated with the agency, and it provides all the benefits, I think, of having staff there, training there. People come to take a look at the agency, they're able to see the commission's involvement with electronic gaming and knowledge of electronic gaming. It just seems to me that long term it would benefit the agency more if it was co-located.
I know I'd like to see those numbers. I just don't know of any other agency that has labs in downtown Boston with the cost. And when we're talking about training our staff, the staff we're talking about, gaming agents are out throughout the state at the casinos, and I'll tell you, it's a hardship for them to come into Boston. There's no parking. You know, so I for one would like to see the comparison of an off-site lab with parking available and easy access for folks to come in and train. I absolutely see the value of training. That's important. But like I say, I would love to see those comparison numbers before making a final decision. You know, we're talking loading docks and folks getting in with machines into downtown Boston. That is not easy to do. And I know gaming commissions that are in the city have labs outside the city. I know that from state police laboratories, and I frankly don't think it's a real hardship to supervise staff at a different location. I'm very, very familiar with that model, and I know it can work well, and so I would just like to see the difference before we make that decision.
Absolutely. There is one more point I wanted to address, and that's the short-term need to be able to license machines to be put in the slot parlor. And so I think we are, in addition to hiring a gaming laboratory manager, I think we want to look at a short-term engagement contract with one of the testing laboratories to help us support the licensing of the initial block of slot machines. So I think that's the other proposal I'm going to make. We will not, we're not going to have a full process in time, so I think that's a consideration. And so the ask today, I think, is, for your approval to continue to flesh out the model, to hire somebody with industry expertise that can help us with that, and help us with the request for proposal to engage with the vendors to help us with the testing and the certification of the machines. And I'll be prepared to come back to you, with more information, costs, and more details about this.
Go ahead.
John, I appreciate this proposal. I like the idea of the hybrid mix. And for several of the arguments that you raised, both when you and I met and today, when you were looking at other jurisdictions, I don't know why you went to Washington State, but when you were looking at other jurisdictions, did you find any correlation between having their own lab based on number of facilities, number of people that they were doing testing for? Was it, they have their own lab because of the just number of casinos and slot machines in the area. I mean, was there any correlation between that and whether they operated on their own?
One of the things is the business cycle for the certification and approval process. And, for a lab to be able to staff to handle the cycles of You know, a lot of machines and then no machines, I think, became very difficult. So in Nevada, for instance, they changed their model. They were a full-service laboratory. They had a staff of 40 people. And in 2010, they changed that model to depend on independent test laboratories just because they couldn't handle the volume and because a lot of the testing is standard. So there are standards, the testing is done, and now they focus on risk. So their staff is looking at new technology. They are testing and evaluating higher risk scenarios in the games that are being brought forward. So I think they're able to focus less on a repetitive process of just testing and certifying and more on understanding the changes in the technology and the associated risks to be able to make good decisions and have testing protocols that take into account the new technologies. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think
No, it does.
it's kind of a volume-related thing. I think it's to have a state laboratory that tests only for that state seems to me to be a waste of time, because if you think about all the jurisdictions, there are many machines. I think IGT told me they had 400 locations around the world that had their machines in them. Well, a certification for a jurisdiction of Nevada is a higher bar than the GLI standards, which a lot of the states use as their foundational standard. And we'll talk about standards and regulation framework. I'd have a little bit on that later. But I think what we're doing makes the best sense from an efficiency standpoint. I think it also makes the best sense from a collaboration and a workflow with the people who were involved in the process, the labs, the manufacturers, and the operators.
I love the notion of having our staff trained, having them on site. Something goes wrong with the machine, and the commission's response shouldn't be, well, let me get GLI on the phone, and maybe they can tell you what's wrong. So I do like the idea of building the expertise, the capacity, the technology, intelligence about these machines going forward. But like Commissioner Zuniga said and Commissioner Cameron, I'm a little curious on the operating costs of an actual facility in downtown Boston as opposed to someplace else. I can tell you can get cheap space past $495.
Okay. Somewhere out in the Springfield area, maybe.
No comment.
You said, John, that you were thinking in the short term of getting a contract with one of the two labs to do the certifications for the slot spoiler. Is it conceivable that you do both? I'm thinking of the fact that some may be certified by one, some by the other.
Well, I mean, we're going to conduct an open procurement, so we may end up awarding the short-term contract to both or multiple labs. There's more than just the two that I mentioned that I've talked to.
That's, I would just.
So, I mean, I think we'll award it on the merits. I'm not sure to manage just the 1,250 machines, whether that may be problematic to manage two vendors to get that done. But I don't know. I think we have to have the conversation with the operator who gets the license and also with the manufacturers who are going to sell them product.
That's something that we should contemplate in the procurement and leave ourselves the option to pre-qualify more than one respondent for different disciplines. Somebody could be a testing, somebody else could be doing an exception basis retesting or reporting. Or there's a number of things that we can contemplate on the procurement.
Well, I just raised it because there are some that are certified by one and some that are certified by another, and it'd be a shame to have one that was certified, unless it was, unless there was a business case for doing it. Some to have it, something was certified by one have to be recertified by the other. That's the only reason.
Well,
but you know that. You know that.
I think the sharing of certifications, I mean, it's not out of the question, and Rick and I had this conversation the other day, that we would look to some of the states that do the full service testing. If they're testing a machine, maybe we accept their certification for a machine because it meets our standards, and we can validate that. And so that's a possibility too, to take the certification of other jurisdictions as a part of our approval process to license.
You said that Pennsylvania has it totally in-house, right?
Yes, they do. Yep, they have 10 staff. They're their intake in terms of revenue, because they do bill for testing. So in the relationship model, manufacturers pay for the testing. So in Pennsylvania, manufacturers paid to the state to have machines tested. But what I was going to say is it's not a solvent model. They run it at a loss. Their lab runs at a loss based on information that they've provided us. So.
Would you include them in your, not maybe your short-term RFP, but maybe the short-term RFP, but would we consider, maybe you said this, would we consider making a deal with Pennsylvania to have them be our primary tester?
Not, I wouldn't say primary, but I think
not?
we could. I'm not sure that they have the capacity to be able to handle work outside of their own jurisdiction. I think we could look at machines that were being requested to be placed here that have been tested there, and if their standards and you know, are complementary to ours, and we can validate that what they issue would be a certification that we would accept in the process, that I think we would consider them. But I'm not sure we would want to fund. I don't know.
One of the drawbacks of a private lab in-house is the technology changes so quickly, very different than 30 years ago, that keeping your staff trained is a real issue. It's one of the real drawbacks. I think
Well,
why we're
but
not
that's-
recommending doing that.
But you're suggesting the possibility that Pennsylvania can't do the job of keeping up with the industry, which may be right, I don't know, but just
Well, I
on the.
didn't actually say that. I just.
Well, I thought that's the
well,
point you were implying, was the point that.
It is,
For
it
little
is,
operations,
it's a
it's-
challenge.
Yeah,
I
okay.
wouldn't want to presume to know their operation, but it is a challenge. And one of the recommendations why we didn't go with our own lab was the fact that it is constantly changing technology.
Yeah, well, I'm not suggesting we go to our own lab, but just, I have no idea how the economics would work out. But if they are fundamentally doing the job, and there's an economy of scale, phenomenal economy of scale, to give them, if their business is now X, and we can give them 40% more of X, then their arithmetic is immensely enhanced. And why would we not contemplate that one as one of the possibilities?
Well, if I might weigh in just for a minute, because I think that what the concept is when we issue an RFR for procurement of this, I think we want to make it as broad as we can. And I don't just see the RFR as just solely for testing for the slots part of it. I think there's other opportunity for training as we bring our staff on, responses, so there's, I think, other elements to the RFR besides just that particular purpose. I've heard several times about state labs being unable to respond because of training issues. I have to respectfully disagree, and I oftentimes look at the private labs test advertisements as they move forward. I can appreciate the fact that they're in the business of gaining more money. But from my experience, I've clearly seen that a state lab has the ability to keep and retain experience necessary. As a matter of fact, attract experience from manufacturers in order to be able to answer. So I think the different part is the private labs really have the ability to bring a lot of resources together all at once. And I think the question is there's a practical level that the commission wants to be involved, even to be acquainted and experienced in. This is an enterprise that we're talking about probably 80 to 90% of the revenue that's generated in the system. It's a huge part of the commission's regulatory task. I think it's to recommend that it be solely done. I think either way, but definitely solely contracted out. I would think delivers an element that the commission really needs to be aware of in order to do its job.
I'm not talking about that, just to be clear. We're settled, and we're going to do the hybrid. I'm just talking about who's going to do.
That's what I think what we're trying to say is we're trying to say that the either or is, John's not recommending, I don't recommend, we recommend the hybrid model that leverages in the best way we can the resources that are available out the private labs, or if
if there was a there, make sure we have a reciprocal system with other states that actually conduct this whole testing. So, Mr. Chairman, I think what you suggested is something that should be explored.
Yeah, I agree. I think, collaboration with the other states, sharing information, it goes on now informally. They meet once a year out in Las Vegas, the technology directors, to talk about standards and how the industry has evolved. So I think it's a conversation that's worth pursuing and continuing. Pennsylvania was very cooperative in opening the kimono and telling us, how they operate their lab and how their staff works, et cetera. But I think there's GLI and BMM and the other labs have, large staffs. They have math departments with PhDs that are able to do analysis on, the algorithms that are built into behind the games. And I think it's a complex, you have to be an engineer, essentially. I'm a computer guy, I'm a technology guy, but this was a lot of learning for me. So my hope is that you'll approve the model and the hiring of a manager, and I can come back to you in short order with an operating model along with costs and some recommendations on how the lab would function and the business processes, et cetera. So,
Isn't it also true that the independent labs are, while not excluding the state labs as a possible source, that the independent labs between the two majors see almost all the machines that are put into play, and the likelihood that they have to start from scratch for some machine that'll go into one of our places is much lower than if you go to a particular state, which may not have a particular machine.
right. So that's the ask on the lab. We've talked just a minute about standards and regulations. So the recommendation I have on standards is that we create a set of technical standards for the Commonwealth using GLI's, next slide, Artem. Actually, I think next two. Yeah. Using GLI's standards as a foundation and referencing those, but having a set of technical standards for the Commonwealth where we were able to put in anything that's specific to our desire to manage, such as social gaming, maybe limiting payout tables or things like that for responsible gaming. So a number of states have done this. I think GLI, even BMM, in their communications and conversations with me, recognize GLI's published standards as, as an industry standard set. So I think it's a good starting place. So these are the standards up on the board, and there's some that are unrelated, so we wouldn't do lottery-based standards or kiosks or things like that. So I'd like to have that direction, that we could start to develop a set of standards using GLI standards as a foundation. And the next slide, Artem. And then Artem is working with me on a regulatory framework, and these are just the high-level categories. You have in your packet the details of the framework. I would like, hopefully, your approval to continue to flesh that out, to put meat on those bones of the regulatory framework, so that we can have a foundation to be able to regulate. So.
You're not going to get me second guessing that.
No, that's the
Sounds
sound
good, John,
approach.
thank you.
That's the sound approach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think that's a good approach. You don't need a vote on that, do you? I mean, it's a consensus.
I guess
that
if I get a go forward from the group, then
Right.
we'll go forward, and
Right.
we'll come back to you
Right.
at a later date with some more
This
details.
is really at a conceptual level at the moment.
Part of the plan was to be able to, not like tomorrow or anything, but part of the plan is moving forward with the hybrid concept is a gambling lab manager. And so we would like to be able to incorporate that in the process as we move forward. If we consider that within this.
Incorporate what?
Incorporate a
Gaming.
recruiting and obtaining a gambling lab manager.
Yeah, that seemed like it was part of the deal. That's,
Right.
we've approved that, right? I mean, however this thing works out, it sounded like we have approved that you want to get that person on board quickly, because that person will be central in overseeing however you want to tweak this hybrid, implement the hybrid.
So you're delegating the authority to hire then? That's-
Yeah.
Okay.
John, do you have a interview group that will have enough experience to hire a good person? Can we help you find somebody? I mean,
Do you know anybody? No,
well, no, I'm saying,
No,
I'm thinking maybe somebody from another state might help with the interviews. I mean, we're treading into new water here in the new position that,
Over the last couple of months, I've developed some relationships with some peers in other states that I'm sure will be willing to help. They've been very helpful up to this point, so yes.
good, okay.
I asked
Maybe
in
we'll
the-
even get some applicants from other states that have experience.
I asked him the same question, and I had an idea he was holding his cards close to his chest.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ombudsman Ziemba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. By way of general update, we've had very significant progress in regard to agreements on Category 2, and we just obviously had a very important deadline regarding Category 1. For Category 2, just recently we had 4 new surrounding community agreements that were outstanding as of our last meeting. Foxborough, Easton, Bolton, and Fitchburg as well. All told, the applicants and community's been working very hard to reach agreements between surrounding community agreements and nearby agreements. I think we have 20 agreements for the three Category 2 applicants, and that's 20 out of 21. There remains one that is outstanding, and as of about an hour or so ago, it's been reported that conversations continue, and I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to negotiate before they get into full-fledged arbitration. They have the two parties, Bridgewater and Raynham, selected an arbitrator. The arbitrator has materials from both sides, or at least the materials that we have put together. But they continue to have conversations in order to avoid the true arbitration of that matter. So there's some optimism that we can perhaps award our license ahead of the schedule that we outlined just recently, and potentially we could take some steps to further the process if the commission thinks that it's a good idea. For example, we could consider closing out the host community hearings for the 2 applicants that have reached all of their agreements, and that might be a way of moving that forward. And there are a couple of different dates that we could consider in the next couple of weeks, but I could work with Janice and the executive director in order to come up with some final dates for those hearings. As early as maybe even next Wednesday, we could go ahead and close out one of those hearings.
Great.
I think that'd be a terrific step. This is, and if, to go ahead and close those, the hearings that, the way we've left this is that we'll come back and close out the hearing, but only deal with material that was different from the circumstances that existed when we had the last session of the hearing. And for 2 of those communities, everything is done now, and we can go ahead and do it and get ourselves much closer to the license issuing process, and hopefully the last surrounding community agreement will fold into place, and where we can close out that hearing and move forward earlier with a license than we thought we could, or than we've been planning to. So that would be terrific if we could do that. And again, very exciting. We've got the license now, and we're, if we can begin to close this down, it's great.
Now, I've informally told the applicants that for the closeout of the hearings, I don't think that we're expecting the applicants to come forward with any sort of other presentations. I think we've asked a number of questions of them informally, through written method over the last month or so. So for the closeout of those hearings, it would be, if anyone wants to testify on those surrounding community agreements that have been reached, they could do so. The applicant shouldn't feel that they have to get all of their supporters excited about testifying again. I think we've heard that testimony, and that this would be a way for us to finalize the record on that hearing.
Yeah, great.
Good. So in regard to Category 1, we just moved forward the date for surrounding community petitions by 1 calendar day because we recently had a snow day. So by Monday, close of business Monday, the application deadline for surrounding community petitions, that is the deadline. And that changes our schedule somewhat, such that by January 23rd, applicants will need to provide any responses to surrounding community petitions. We had initially anticipated that on January 23rd, we would have presentations from potential surrounding communities and applicants on those petitions. But since the responses from applicants will be due that day, perhaps we could schedule that meeting on January 28th, which would be a Tuesday, and that would be a big day for all surrounding community petitions, applicants, and communities. And still, as of now, we still have scheduled February 6th as the date for decisions on those surrounding communities, and that would also be the date for written designations of surrounding community status to those that have been designated in applications, thus ticking off the 30-day statutory period. Well, one other bit of good news that I have to report is, as of earlier today, West Springfield has been designated as a surrounding community, or will be designated as a surrounding community. In all likelihood, that West Springfield will assent to such designation. So that's one other community that will not be part of the list of petitioning communities. So I think that that's great news. We have recommended to applicants that if they feel that that a community has risen to the level of impacts, that they really should indeed designate those communities as surrounding communities. That's what's called for in our regulations. And what's great news is that the parties have agreed that those conditions exist and that they're going to begin negotiations. So they've had negotiations, but they'll continue those negotiations. And throughout the system, conversations continue even with communities that have not been designated in the applications. So for the fun part of our presentation, I know it's been a long day, there in our application we have...
Hey, John, a quick question before
Yeah.
we move ahead. Impacted live entertainment venues on the same schedule as the surrounding?
They're on the same schedule as well, and we've received a couple of petitions so far this week.
Okay, thanks.
What petitions have we received for surrounding communities? Any?
So far, as of earlier today, we've received Northampton and Malden for the Mohegan Sun application.
And how many else are outstanding, do we think?
It could potentially be as much as 15.
Yike. Okay.
It could be, but
It
we
could
need to
be.
be optimistic here, right?
I'm very
Right,
optimistic.
Right,
A lot of time left.
right.
A lot of time
Lot
left
of time
between now
left.
and Monday.
And a lot of goodwill out there.
Lots of goodwill.
Right.
So we'll see. That's perhaps a negative estimate, but. In our application, what we call for is a choosing by lot in the presentations. So on January 22nd, we're going to have presentations by the 3 applicants of their proposals, and then following that, there'll be surrounding community hearings, and then following that, there'll be host community hearings. And the way that we did it with Category 2 is that once we chose the order, that stuck throughout the whole process. So if you're first to go in your presentation, you're first to have your surrounding community hearing and the like. Here we have a little bit of a different situation in that we have 2 regions, and in Region B, there's obviously, there is just one applicant. So what we recommend is that we move Region B, that applicant will go first in all of our order. But for the remaining 2 Region A applicants, we think that we should choose by lot. That's what's called for in our application on who goes first. So can I have Mr. Sangalang take it from here?
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So the way we decided to do this is I have in my hand a 2-faced chip. On one side, Mohegan Sun, Massachusetts. On the other side, Wynn Everett. What we decided to do is I'll flip the coin once, and the applicant whose logo appears on top, once it hits the ground and stays there, hopefully, will have the choice of either going first, going second, or they can take a page out of Bill Belichick's book and defer the choice. So without any further ado, I think I'll do that now.
You have to
Wait a
pick an
minute,
end
wait a minute,
zone.
woo, woo.
Whoa,
I guess this is further ado.
whoa.
What happens if they defer the choice?
The representatives from the other applicant will be able to choose
Oh, I see.
whether to go first
I
or
see.
second.
I see.
And I think
Okay.
we should call the representatives to come down here.
Right, I
I
think
do
you-
too.
you should stand up.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Michael, you
Stand
going
up.
to come to the middle of the field?
That's right.
You need a referee's jersey
I
or
think
something.
we have a handshake before the coin
Right,
toss.
right, right.
John, you can be an honorary captain.
This is our makeshift chip. Win. Mohegan. It is win.
Win will go second.
When we'll go second.
Sure.
Last.
Last.
MGM goes
Yeah,
first.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So you get to choose the wind.
Yes. That's right. Would-
Yes. Yes.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you both. Thank you.
And that's my
Get that one out
presentation.
there, Director Driscoll.
Right.
Just want to point out
Nicely
Western
done.
Mass was first this time. That's great.
The last shall go first. Okay, anything else?
That's it.
All right. Nice long day. Anything other commissioners? Any other unanticipated
No,
business?
that was a good day.
Yeah.
That was a good day.
Good.
Yeah, thank
Good
you
day.
all.
Got a
Thank
lot
you,
done.
guests.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff.
Thanks,
Lots of stuff got done.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Again, unanimous.